Chapter 63 Final Preparations. Yami stood in the center of a massive chamber deep within the heart of Agrias. The room was covered in glistening symbols that were so arcane he couldn't even begin to read them. He didn't need to read them, however, to know what they did. This was the spell that contained Trihexa. Sealed within what almost seemed like a crystal coffin was the beast of the apocalypse, a creature that not even God himself could defeat. From what Yami understood, the God of the Christian Bible had fought against this creature and, unable to beat it, sealed it away with hundreds of thousands of forbidden seals that continued to shine brightly even after his death during the Great War. It was a testament to the strength of the man who had ruled the heavens. It was, in fact, the act of sealing away Trihexa that led God to losing his life in the war between the three factions. If he had not spent so much of his power sealing the beast away, he would have possessed more than enough strength to contend with the likes of the Satans and fallen angel generals. How much longer will it take to break the seal? He asked someone standing beside him. Not much longer, Rizavam said. We suspect it will take maybe another few days at most. Yami frowned. Didn't you tell me it wouldn't take that long before? Why the change of heart? I had not realized how powerful the forbidden seals keeping Trihexa sealed were. Rizavam shook his head and grinned in that lazy manner Yami knew so well. It's only now, as I stand here and look at all these spells myself, that I realize how powerful God was. Had he been at full strength during the Great War, the devils would have lost. I'm not even sure Sirzax and Ajuka could have stood up to him. Yami sensed begrudging respect in Rizavam's voice. This man hated Ajuka and Sirzax as much as he respected them, which caused him to acknowledge both people while still trying to sound degrading. His voice was the kind that Yami would expect from someone who had been forced to eat shit. The three factions alliance won't stand still now that Agrias has appeared, Yami continued. Rizavam shrugged. It's not like we could have kept it concealed. We need every mage we have working on deciphering these spells to break them down. I did not say it was a bad thing. Yami had yet to look away from Trihex's hideous visage. There was something primal about this beast that appealed to him. So long as we can undo the seal keeping Trihexa locked away, everything else will fall into place. I see you are really going through with this. Another voice spoke up, one far different from Rizavam's. This voice was cold and mocking, as if to declare that everyone here was beneath the one it belonged to. Yami and Rizavam turned around and looked at the god who had entered the room without either of them noticing. One who looked like nothing more than a skeleton decked out in priestly robes. Hades, Yami greeted with a nod. I see you have agreed to work with us. Do not misunderstand my intentions. I have no desire to work with an interloper like you, but the situation we find ourselves in simply makes working with you convenient. A common enemy does indeed make our alliance convenient. Can I count on you when the time comes? So long as our circumstances don't change, Hades said with a shrug. Then that is fine. Once we have crushed Naruto, the underworld, and everyone else who opposes us underfoot, you and I will probably become enemies. Though I won't fight you so long as you don't get in my way. I should be the one saying that. Do not get in my way after this is all over. Hades scoffed at Yami, or that was what it seemed like. It was hard to tell since Hades could not make facial expressions. Before he turned around and stalked off. He marched toward the stairs. Several mages got in his way, but he pushed them aside with godly strength and sent them to the floor. He was quite the violent man. Fool, Rizavam snorted. I still find it hard to believe that Hades can think so much of himself when confronted with overwhelming power like yours. I do hope you will kill him the moment his usefulness is at an end. Yami regarded Rizavam for a moment, then shrugged and turned back toward Trihexa and the hundreds of magicians currently going over the forbidden spells that acted as its seal. He watched as one particular magician waved his staff at a circle, causing it to light up, then began creating several magic circles around it. If he was not mistaken, they were using analyze magic to quantify the spells. I don't care enough to kill him, but if he proves to be a nuisance, I will have no problem ending his life. I'm glad to hear it. What of our artificial scale male and mass-produced evil dragons? We currently have 500,000 artificial scale males and 1 million mass-produced evil dragons. Good. And what of Shadow? Did he complete the task I assigned him? He did. We now have the fruit from the tree of knowledge in our hands. Rizavam's chuckle would have made anyone else's skin crawl, but Yami took the ingratiating sound in stride. Those idiots in heaven were so focused on Apophis and Crom Kraut that they didn't even notice that we had stolen some of the fruit. With this, we should be able to recreate dragons that are on par with Apophis and the others. Good. Get at least a few of our magicians on that right now. I would like to have an army ready for the inevitable battle between us and the Three Factions Alliance. Sure thing. Rizavam shrugged. By the way, you don't mind if I plan my own little surprise for those brats in the Gremory peerage, do you? Do what you want. Your graciousness knows no bounds. Rizavim's bow was as mocking as everything else he did. But Yami did not let that bother him. It was just his way. Instead, he continued to watch as the magicians did their work. He hated them and everyone else in this world. But he felt giddy at the same time. It would not be long now before the seal was undone. He was certain their actions would not go unnoticed, and this city was sure to become a battlefield soon, but that didn't matter. Nothing mattered except achieving his goal. Devil Ninja, while Lilith did not appear any different now than it had the last time Naruto visited, that did not mean many changes hadn't taken place. The once bustling streets were now mostly empty. Very few people were leaving their homes, and the ones who did were those who needed to leave for work. A city still needed people working to function. That said, the city was being run on a skeleton crew. There were also quite the number of guards patrolling the city. Their dark armor looked reminiscent to the kind Naruto would have expected to see on an ancient overlord from a video game. Guess that's the underworld for ya. The van they were in took them to an underground parking lot where they all disembarked and were led by Azazel through a building and into a conference room. One so massive it could probably seat thousands. Built with tertiary seating, this room reminded Naruto of a movie he once watched with Rias. It had been some kind of sci-fi. Much of this room was already being filled by various people. Some of them like Cyroorg Biel and his mother, Naruto knew. There were plenty of people who Naruto didn't know, however, and he found himself looking curiously at a few of them. Searsex was already present. He stood beside Ajuka Beelzebub and Seraphal Leviathan, Michael and Gabrielle, Shemazai and Barakiel, and Shiva, Indra, and Brahma from Hindu mythology. Naruto only remembered vaguely meeting them during the battle between them and the Alliance of Hell. He hadn't known about what had happened to them because he had been too focused on everything else that was going on at the time. I'm going to be down there with the other bigwigs, Azazel informed them. You kids find yourselves a seat. It won't be long before the meeting starts. Azazel didn't wait for anyone to respond before leaving them, so Naruto, Rias, and the others were left with no options but to search for an empty group of seats they could use. Fortunately, there were still quite a few places left. As luck would have it, they ended up sitting beside Cyroorg and his peerage. Well, look who finally returned from heaven, Cyroorg said in greeting. How is it up there? It was nice. Heaven's a pretty chill place, though all that holy energy does make me feel disconcerted. Ha ha ha, I'll bet. You know, I think you might be the first devil to enter heaven. Naruto shrugged. It didn't much matter to him if he was the first, second, third, or last devil to enter heaven. He'd only gone there because Michael wanted to help him and Irina. Speaking of heaven, I have a letter for you. It's from Angelus. Oh, well, thank you. Cyroorg looked surprised, but he congenially accepted the letter under his mother's watchful eye. Naruto found himself looking at the woman who seemed so poised and calm. She didn't look frail or sickly like she had when she was lying on a bed inside of the hospital. He was positive Cyroorg was making sure his mother was well cared for. When she caught him staring at her, she turned in his direction and smiled, causing him to smile back. With everyone getting comfortable, Naruto once again found himself surrounded by a veritable wall of feminine flesh. Kaneko and Ophis were on his lap. Rias was on his right. Roswise had taken his left. Naruto was a little surprised the other girls weren't getting into an argument over who took that spot, but Irina was sitting next to Xenovia and Asia, while Ravel was, it looked like she was sitting with her family. He hadn't realized they were close by, but it looked like they were only a few seats away from him. Naruto would have to say hello before they all left. More seats were beginning to fill. It wasn't long before it seemed as if every major power within the Three Factions Alliance was present. Naruto even saw members representing the yokai of Kyoto, though he did not see Yasaka or Kuno anywhere. The famed Kyuubi could not leave Kyoto since that was where the ley lines resided. With everyone supposedly present now, Searsex called the meeting to order. I'm sure many of you have already learned that Agrias went missing not long ago, Searsex began. He stood on something resembling a stage. The other most powerful members of the alliance, along with the Hindu gods, were also present. Its disappearance shocked everyone and sent many people into a panic. We just discovered that Agrias has reappeared again. However, it has been taken over by the Chaos Brigade. The news itself was not surprising. Everyone had already suspected this to be the case, but having it confirmed caused many people to break out into whispers. Naruto wished his hearing was better so he could listen into what they were saying, but at the end of the day, he wasn't sure it mattered. I still can't believe the Chaos Brigade managed to steal away an entire city, Ria said under her breath. Don't forget what kind of power members of the Chaos Brigade wield. Not only do they have the Holy Grail in their possession, they also have many incredibly powerful people working for them, Kiba said. He had his arms crossed as he sat on Rias's other side, looking down at the stage where Searzex and the other leaders were. While we have people like Searzex and Ajuka on our side, I would say quite a few of the Chaos Brigade's forces are just as powerful as our own. They also have the benefit of secrecy. Yes, I know. But I still find myself shocked they were able to accomplish something so audacious and bold like this. Understandable. I'm pretty shocked myself. Down below, Searzex continued to speak. A plan is currently being worked on to reclaim Agrias. However, several problems have revealed themselves. The first two problems is that the Chaos Brigade has somehow managed to raise an army that easily outnumbers our own forces 100 to 1. These words caused the crowd to stir once more, but this time with complete shock. 100 to 1 was not good odds by any means. Hearing that they were so heavily outnumbered was sure to dishearten many of their forces. The first part of their army consists of the mass-produced evil dragons. Each one of these dragons has the strength of a mid-rank devil. The only way to kill them is to either work together in squads, or for one of our more powerful members to fight them. There are several skilled devils here who could take down several of these dragons on their own, but they are few and far between. Most of you will have to work in groups. The second part of their army are these. Naruto found himself leaning forward alongside everyone else when two very familiar figures appeared like a large hologram in the air. While there were some minor variations like how the helmet sloped back, or how the gauntlets possessed blades instead of claws, it was easy to tell that the red and white armored figures were some kind of variation of the boosted gear and divine dividing. I'll let Ajuka take over now to explain what you're all seeing, Searzex said, stepping back and allowing his friend to step forward. Naruto was surprised to see that Ajuka was going to speak. The man was not what he would have called socially adept, nor was he any good at oratory. That was more Searzex's thing. Ajuka was the kind of man who preferred spending all his time cooped up inside of his laboratory. I'm sure everyone here can recognize the two figures being displayed. They're quite obviously designed off the balance breaker for the boosted gear of the Red Dragon Emperor and divine dividing used by the White Dragon Emperor. I've taken to calling them fake dragon armor, for that is exactly what they are. Using the powers of the Holy Grail, they have managed to create artificial scale mail that has all the powers of the sacred gears they're based on. A ripple spread through the crowd. Naruto looked around to find worried faces staring at the two armored holographic figures. It didn't surprise him to see all these people acting worried. The boosted gear and divine dividing were Longinus of the highest order, powerful artifacts that were capable of even defeating gods. And now those two powerful weapons were being mass-produced by their enemy. Ajuka continued. Fortunately, while both types of fake dragon armor have all the powers of the boosted gear and divine dividing, they only have a tenth of the strength. A mid-rank devil should be a match for both types of armor. The problem lay not in the power they possess but their numbers. At last count, there were over 500,000 of these fake dragon armors. Naruto could almost hear the sound of everyone sucking in their breath. Devils, angels, and fallen angels were not very numerous. Not only had many of their forces been depleted during the war between all three factions, but it was impossible for most of them to reproduce. It was rare for devils to give birth. Angels could not reproduce at all without God's aid, and the fallen were only born when an angel fell from God's grace. While the evil peace and brave saints system had been put in place to replenish the forces they lost, they were still a long way from being able to compete with those kind of numbers. Will our forces even be able to compete with that? Asked someone in the audience. Naruto didn't know who asked that, nor could he find them within the crowd. I'll have Searzex answer that question, Ajuka said. With the mic once again handed off to him, Searzex stepped forward and, projecting an aura of complete confidence, spoke to the people present. While we cannot compete with them in terms of numbers, We do not have to. I'm sure all of you have noticed that we have 3 special guests here today. The 3 with us are Brahma, Indra, and Shiva, who have entered into an alliance with us to deal with the Chaos Brigade. Stunned silence met his proclamation, and with good reason. The Hindu gods were some of the strongest in the entire world. With those words, the massive gathering seemed to settle down. Naruto looked over at the Hindu gods after they were mentioned and saw the ugly smirk on Indra's face. He was obviously basking in his own superiority. Now then, there are several other problems we will need to deal with aside from the mass-produced dragons and fake dragon armor, Seerzex continued. Those are the more powerful members of their group. Rizavam, the evil dragons, Lilith, and Yami himself. While we have reason to suspect Yami won't make an appearance on the battlefield, the other 3 are powerful foes we would do well not to underestimate. Lilith, in particular, as she now holds nearly all of Ophus's power. We don't know what kind of plan is being made for her, but we do not believe they will let her sit this battle out when her contribution could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Fortunately, most of you won't have to worry about these forces since they will be dealt with by myself and the others. Your focus is going to be on the fake dragon armors and mass-produced dragons. Seerzex went into a detailed explanation of their plan to assault and reclaim Agrias, which involved an assault from all sides by their forces, which would be divided into 4 divisions who would come in from the 4 cardinal points. There were only a few problems with this plan that Naruto could think of. The first was that they were clearly outnumbered. Even if every faction present combined their forces, they would have maybe a third of the forces arrayed against them. Once again, Seerzex had a plan for that. We plan on having several of our more powerful members marching within each division. They should be able to make up for our lack of numbers. However, I want it known that our main goal is not to fight against their main forces. Our main goal is to remove their leaders, Yami and Rizavam. If we can remove their leaders from the playing field, the rest of them shouldn't be too difficult to defeat. It was a solid plan, one that went with the idea of cutting off the head so the body would fall. Naruto had used this type of tactic many times in the past. So had some of his fiercest foes. While Madara had simply sought to demolish everyone and everything in his path, Kabuto had tried several times to get rid of him and the other powerful individuals within the Shinobi Alliance's army. Each of you will be placed under a field commander, who will issue your orders. I know we are asking a lot, but please remain within the hotel until you receive your orders. After that, you may do what you want with the remaining free time available. We will be attacking Agras in 3 days. That appeared to be the cue for everyone to leave. People stood up from their chairs and made their way toward one of several dozen doors. Naruto remained seated alongside the other members of the Gremory peerage. Rias did not want to be crushed by all the people attempting to rush out of the meeting hall. It looks like brother has really thought all this through, Rias murmured to herself. It's pretty basic as far as plans go, but a battle like this would be too convoluted if they came up with a plan that was too complex, Naruto said. I hope they will let me deal with Lilith, Ophus interjected. I would like to get my powers back. It would be helpful if you could get your powers back, Naruto agreed. What do you think our role in this battle will be? Asked Kiba. Naruto will definitely be fighting his counterpart, but I doubt the rest of us will be allowed to take part in that particular battle, Kaneko said. Kaneko is right. Rias nodded toward the Nekusho. Seerzex will probably have us take part in the larger battle against the mass-produced dragons and fake dragon armor. Aiz might be asked to accompany the leaders alongside Naruto because of his boosted gear, but the rest of us won't be allowed to fight against the more powerful members of the Chaos Brigade's forces. A few minutes passed before Rias directed her group to stand up and leave. The congested staircases had cleared out enough that they wouldn't be squashed by the other people attempting to leave. Perhaps because they had the same idea, Cyroorg, his mother, and the Phoenix family chose to leave at the same time they did. Naruto noticed that Riser Phoenix was also with his family. The man must have felt him watching because he turned his head, nodded once to him, and then focused his attention back on his family. Huh. Guess he's not an arrogant douche anymore. Naruto fell in line with the others, walked out of the massive auditorium, and stepped into the hallway. A few of the people who were present during the meeting were standing around in the hall and discussing the meeting itself. Naruto and his group were traveling toward their designated rooms when Seerzex himself appeared before the group. He wore a grave expression that caused them all to be brought up short. I apologize, but could I speak with Aiz for a moment? Seerzex asked. Sure. "What do you need me for?" asked Issei, stepping forward. "I have something important to tell you. However, I do not think we should talk about it here. Please follow me." While Issei was still clearly confused about what Searsex wanted with him, he dutifully followed the older man. As they disappeared around a corner, the Gremory peerage continued moving. "Well, Naruto, it looks like this is where we part ways for now. Thanks again for delivering Angela's letter to me," Cyroorg said. "You're welcome. I hope your relationship with Angelus works out," Naruto said with a cheery grin. His smile became even wider when he saw Cyroorg cough into his hands several times and avert his eyes. The blush staining his face was something Naruto had never seen on the normally confident and powerful man. They parted ways with Cyroorg, his peerage, and his mother, and continued walking. Eventually, the Phoenix family turned to them as well. "And this is where we will leave you all," said Lord Phoenix. Lady Phoenix bowed. "Please continue to look after our daughter. Don't worry. We will do our best to continue looking after Revel. She's a member of our family, after all," Rias said with a gentle smile. "Hey, fox boy," Riser shouted. Naruto blinked as he pointed at himself. "You mean me? Who else would I be talking about? Listen, you had better take care of Revel. If I hear so much as a rumor that you made her cry, I will come to claim your head. Not even all the powers in the world will stop me from enacting my revenge." It was obvious to Naruto that this man didn't have the power to do what he wanted, and it was probably obvious to Riser too. His words were mere bluster. However, the fact that he was thinking about his sister instead of himself told Naruto that Riser was on the mend, that he was actually becoming a better person, and so Naruto decided to respond like he would normally. He thumped a fist against his chest, grinned, and said, "Don't worry. I'll die before letting anything happen to Revel. She's one of my most precious people, after all." While Revel blushed and looked at the ground, Riser merely nodded before turning on his heel and walking away. Lord and Lady Phoenix traded amused glances before they bowed to Rias and hurried after their son. "Please forgive him," Ruvel said with a smile. "He's doing his best to become a good brother again." "It's no trouble at all. I'm glad to see the Phoenix family's fractured relationship has been repaired," Rias said, waving off Ruvel's apology with her own gentle expression. The eldest member of the Phoenix family thanked Rias for her kindness before heading off after his parents. Naruto wondered if he would end up fighting alongside Riser at some point in the future. Perhaps they would even become friends. As if that would ever happen. Devil Ninja. Naruto and the others didn't spend time inside of their hotel rooms, which were nice but only meant for a few people. Instead, they decided to check out the hotel's facilities. While it didn't boast as many amenities as Naruto's house, it did have an Olympic swimming pool, a small water park, an arcade, a hot spring, and a lounge where people could sit on comfortable massage chairs. Naruto found himself playing arcade games with Rias. The game they were playing right now was called Taiko Drum Master. It vaguely reminded Naruto of another game called Guitar Hero, but this was with drums, and the goal was to pound the drum at exactly the right time. Small symbols moved across the screen. Your job as the player was to hit the drum just as the symbols moved over the indicator. Naruto stared intently at the screen as it displayed two areas where small symbols of either red or blue were scrolling across the screen. One of the blue orbs suddenly appeared in a small translucent circle. He struck the drum and watched as the orb bounced up and transformed into a little chibi character that ran across the top of the screen. Several more orbs appeared in rapid succession, but Naruto continued to hit the drum with timing and precision only possible because he was the greatest fucking ninja ever and his reflexes were some of the best in the world. Hell yeah. I'm a drumming ninja super freak. Look at how awesome I'm doing. I should go ahead and call myself the Drumkage at this rate. There ain't no one better at this game than me. If I wasn't a ninja, I'd almost feel like I was cheating. Naruto laughed to himself. This particular version of Taiko Drum Master was based on the Toho games, which was a very popular franchise of maniac shooter games. The longer he went with a perfect score, the more Toho characters that would appear at the bottom, dancing to the rhythm set by his insanely amazing drumming. Of course, this wasn't a single-person game but one meant for two. It pitted him and Rias against each other. The redhead was standing right next to him, also banging away at the drums, and it seems she was doing very well for herself. He spared a quick glance at her and saw that she also had a perfect score like him. This caused Naruto to narrow his eyes. It seemed he was not the only Drumkage in this vicinity. Naruto could feel his competitive spirit soaring. They continued beating away at the drums and eventually scored a tie when the game ended. After staring at the matching scores on the screen, the two turned to each other. "You're gonna have to do better than that if you want to beat me," Rias taunted him with a smile even as she continued smacking away at the drum. "Ha, don't worry. I'm just getting warmed up, now the real battle begins." Since this level of gameplay was obviously too easy for them both, they decided to crank up the difficulty. There was no difficulty setting. However, some of the songs were harder than others simply because of how chaotic they were. This particular arcade game had all kinds of songs from classic folk songs to the latest anime theme songs. The song they chose this time was from a classic anime series called Code Geass. The song was Colors. Naruto and Rias once again set off. Both were determined to win. Naruto didn't even need to look at his girlfriend cum fiancé to know that she had every intention of defeating him, but that didn't mean he was going to lose. No, he couldn't lose. His pride as the drumkage was on the line. "I'm one." While it was just a simple two-word sentence, those two words were so powerful that it took everything Naruto had not to look over at Rias. It was instinct to want to look despite the fact that he knew she wasn't one. Even though he did not look at her, his body froze for a second, which caused him to miss several drum beats, lowering his score. He quickly tried to get back on track, but it was already too late. Rias had pulled ahead. "That was dirty," he accused. Rias smiled as she continued to pound the drum. "Aren't you the one who constantly says if you're not cheating, you're not trying? I'm just putting your advice into practice." Naruto grimaced. He had indeed said that exact phrase on numerous occasions, but this was the first time anyone had dared to use it against him. That the person using his own philosophy against him was Rias, of all people, was perhaps expected. She knew him the best. He honestly should have seen this coming. That he hadn't caused him a great deal of shame. However, that didn't just mean Naruto was going to give up. Nay, he couldn't give up. "You know, I was thinking the stakes aren't high enough. What do you say we raise them?" "I'm listening." Naruto kept his eyes on his screen, watching the symbols and pounding the drum with the precision of a high-output supercomputer. He rolled the drumsticks as a long stream of symbols appeared. Down below, several Toho characters he recognized were dancing to the rhythm. "If I win, how about you let me plug all 3 of your holes using shadow clones?" Now it was Rias's turn to freeze. Her entire body locked up and her cheeks turned a deep scarlet. No doubt she was imagining what it would be like to have 3 Narutos taking her in all 3 of her holes. They had done it before and she had admitted to him in private that it was one of the hottest things she'd ever done and would be more than willing to do it again. However, Naruto had not been as interested. They might have been his clones, but seeing his Rias being plowed by other dicks had not been pleasant for him, even if those dicks were still technically his. And now he was offering to do that for her. Of course she would freeze. And of course her score would drop. "Now who's playing dirty?" asked Rias with a scowl as she realized their roles had reversed. Naruto just gave her a brilliantly foxy smile. "If you're not cheating, you're not trying." Devil Ninja. Unfortunately for both Naruto and Rias, neither of them were able to defeat the other. They both began escalating their dirty talk, until neither of them was fit to continue playing, and they had to be brought to their room by the others. Naruto woke up the next morning to find himself lying on his bed, with a redhead in one arm and a petite blonde in the other. He blinked when he realized Le Fay was in his bed. They weren't really what you would call intimate. She had slept with him and the others on a few occasions, but their relationship was unofficial. It was for this reason that he wondered what she was doing here. "Rias. Le Fay. Time to get up." With the sun streaming in through the window, Naruto knew it was time for them to rise. He began shaking the 2 women awake. Both stirred, though only Rias woke up. She sat in bed, stretching her arms, bare breasts jiggling in his face, and yawned widely. Le Fay, on the other hand, groaned and burrowed deeper into his shoulder. "Good morning, Naruto," Rias muttered as she leaned back down and kissed him. Naruto accepted the kiss even though he was still trying to wake up Le Fay, which Rias eventually noticed. "Oh, it seems Le Fay joined us last night." "You don't seem too surprised," Naruto said with a raised eyebrow. It didn't look like Le Fay was going to wake up quite yet, so Naruto stopped shaking her and instead placed his hand on her hips. She was wearing pajama bottoms, so he couldn't feel her silky skin against his palm, but that was fine. The warmth she emitted was pleasant enough. "I'm not." Rias shook her head. "You know how Le Fay joined us in bed the day before we left for the underworld? That's because we've all been talking. LeFay expressed an interest in joining us, and so we decided to let her join as a sort of trial run to see if being a part of your harem was something she wanted. Rias looked down at LeFay as she snored in a way that was oddly cute. She smiled. I think it is safe to say she's gonna be joining us from now on. Huh, Naruto didn't know what to say, so he said that. Rias soon left the bed and wandered into the private bathing room. Each bedroom was equipped with its own bath and shower. That left the task of waking the blonde up to him. While it did take a little while, Naruto was able to eventually wake up LeFay. Morning, Fei-chan. Ah. Naruto. Good morning. LeFay blushed when she realized their relative positions, but she didn't shy away from him, which seemed to prove Rias's words. Hope you don't mind that I'm the one in your bed instead of Kaneko or Ravel. I know they're usually the ones you sleep with. I don't mind. In fact, this is perfect. I was eventually gonna ask you to become mine, but the opportunity never presented itself. Naruto brushed some of her hair behind her ear, then settled his hand on her cheek. They were still lying on the bed, on their sides so they faced each other. LeFay, will you become mine? Of course, LeFay muttered. That's what I've wanted for a while now. Naruto thought it was a bit odd that he was asking LeFay to be his after they had already had sex, but he had decided a long time ago not to question these things. He leaned up and pressed his lips to LeFay's, surprising the girl and making her release a startled squeak. Surprised or not, it wasn't long before she was leaning into him, kissing him. Her soft lips pressed harder against him before she took one of his lips between her teeth and nibbled on it. They would have continued kissing, but Rias chose that moment to walk out of the bathing room. She was dressed in a white bathrobe and a towel was around her hair. A few strands of red spilled from between the white. Showers ready for whoever wants to freshen up, Rias announced. I'll go first, LeFay said, hopping out of bed and making for the bathroom door. She seems embarrassed, Rias said. Naruto tilted his head. You think so? I do. Rias sat on the bed, though she only remained on its edge. Naruto, I feel like I should tell you this now, but we girls have been talking, and we decided that LeFay is the last woman we'll allow into your harem. So, basically, you don't want me to have any more women in my life? Naruto asked for clarification. Yes. I think being romantically involved with 7 women is more than enough, don't you? I suppose so. Naruto honestly didn't care how many or few women he slept with, so long as he loved them and they loved him. But it seemed Rias and the others wanted to impose a limit, which was fine with him too. He did think there should be a limit to how many women he slept with. The more women in his life, the less time he had to spend with each one. LeFay soon emerged from the bathing room and Naruto entered to take a quick shower. He came out minutes later, got dressed, and the 3 of them left the bedroom and traveled to the dining hall. They weren't the only ones who had decided to eat breakfast. There were already several hundred people within the dining hall, a strange mix of angels, devils, gods, fallen angels, and yokai congregating together as if it were natural. While Naruto was able to ignore the strangeness because he was from a different world, Rias could not help but release an amazed gasp when she saw all those different races eating together like old friends. Despite how many people were already eating, it didn't take long for them to find the rest of their peerage. Everyone from the so-called Gremory group was seated around a long table. Ravel was daintily eating her meal next to Kaneko, who had loaded her plate up with only the sweetest foods around. Consequently, Kaneko was ignoring Roswise as the Valkyrie tried to lecture her on eating healthy. It seemed this hotel featured a buffet-style breakfast. After piling all kinds of breakfast foods onto his plate, Naruto sat down across from Issei, and only then noticed the somber atmosphere surrounding the young man. What's wrong? Asked Naruto. His question was met with silence at first. Issei was staring into his runny eggs, not eating, but silently brooding. It was very un-Issei-like. Sitting on either side of him were Rainier and Asia, who were rubbing his back. They were trying their best to comfort the young man, but it was like he didn't even notice their attempts. Naruto looked at Asia, but she shook her head. We don't know what's wrong either, she confessed. He came to bed last night like this. He hasn't said a single word. It was probably something Searsek said, Rainier said with a click of her tongue. Honestly, why the fuck can't Issei just tell us what's on his damn mind? Does he think we're fucking mind readers or something? How are we supposed to help if he's gonna brood like some little bitch? That's rich coming from a woman who actually is a bitch, Akeno said in a mild voice. Keep talking, cunt. Stop fighting, you two, Issei finally spoke, releasing an irritated sigh. His words might not have seemed like much, but they stunned the two girls into silence. They looked at each other, then at Issei, and then they began quietly eating. Naruto and the others all wondered what was going on with Issei, but they didn't think they would be getting anything out of him right now, so they instead focused on their meal. The food was delicious. It was a much more European meal, with eggs, sausage, bacon, hash browns, and toast. Naruto lathered his food in Tabasco sauce, which was something he saw someone do in an anime he watched once. Some of his friends gave him looks. However, this really did enhance the flavor. The spiciness of the Tabasco contrasted nicely with the saltiness of the sausage and bacon. Sometime during their meal, Azazel entered the dining hall, located them, and made a beeline to their table. The look on his face was pretty grave. "After you all finish eating, I need you to come with me," he said without preamble. No one knew what Azazel wanted with them. Naruto glanced at Rias and Roswise. But even the two who were most known for keeping abreast of the situation didn't seem to know what the former fallen angel leader wanted. Because everyone was curious, they quickly hurried to finish their breakfast, then left with Azazel as he led them to a much smaller meeting room than the auditorium they had used the other day. In the center of the room was a long table. A number of people were already sitting there, including the leaders of the Three Factions Alliance, the Hindu gods, and several of their more powerful members like Siraorg, Bael and Gabriel. Metatron was also present, though Naruto almost didn't recognize him since he was dressed like a ninja. Even his head was covered in a black mask. Another thing Naruto noticed was that Zeus and Posdian were present. It had been a long time since he'd seen them. He almost forgot that after the battle to rescue Circex, Michael, Azazel, and the other alliance leaders when they were being mind-controlled, the Greek gods had become members of the Three Factions Alliance. "Thank you for coming. Please be seated," Circex said to them. "I'm going to go out on a limb and assume whatever you want to discuss has to do with our plans to reclaim Agrias?" Rias asked as she sat down with Naruto on her left. Kaneko took Naruto's other side before the others could. Ophis scowled at her but slowly moved to another seat. "That is correct." Circex nodded, his expression remaining impassive. He waited until everyone in the Gremory group was seated, then began again. "Before we begin, I would like to say that a situation has occurred that will complicate our plans. We learned not long ago that Rizavam Lucifer has kidnapped Issei's parents." "Wait, you fucking serious?" Naruto asked in shock. He stood up and pressed his hands flat against the table. "I am very serious," Circex said. "We believe the reason Issei's parents were taken is because he's one of our heavy hitters, but also because his parents are the easiest targets," Azazel chimed in. "They are both humans living in the human world. What's more, neither of them is aware of the supernatural world like Irina's parents are. They're just regular people, and we have done our best to keep it that way. Unfortunately, this has come back to bite us in the metaphorical ass." Naruto slowly sat back down and glanced at Issei, who had kept very quiet up to this point. Now that he knew what happened, he understood why the young man was so silent. Circex and the others must have told him about this the other day. "This is a rather unprecedented disaster," Michael said. "What do you think we should do?" "HMPH. Does it really matter if the brat's parents were kidnapped? It doesn't change your goals, does it?" asked Indra, arms crossed as he smirked at everyone present. Issei looked up and glared at the man, but the Hindu god of war was not intimidated in the least. He grinned. "Now there's a scary look. Careful, brat. I might assume you're threatening me and kill you on instinct." His words only caused Issei to glare harder. But Circex broke in before he or anyone else could say something to escalate the situation. "Now isn't the time for us to argue like this. It is true that our plans to reclaim Agrias haven't changed, but we need to accommodate for this new development. The original plan called for Eyes helping fight against the Alliance of Hell, who we learned have formed a temporary alliance with the Chaos Brigade. However, I'm pretty sure Eyes won't be able to fight against the Alliance of Hell when he's worried about his parents. Which means we need to relocate some of our troops so they can take on the Alliance of Hell, but we don't have anyone who can match Eyes in terms of raw power," Michael said with a sigh. "You don't need to defeat anyone from the Alliance of Hell," Ophis suddenly declared. Everyone turned to her. "What do you mean?" asked Azazel. Puffing up her chest, Ophis gave them an oddly bold smile. "All you need to do is get a group who can hold off the Alliance of Hell long enough for me to regain my power. Once I've regained my power from Lilith, I will be able to squash Hades and his ilk flat. Ophis was originally the most powerful creature in the entire world, ranked number 1 on the top 10 strongest beings in the world, until Rizavim used Samael to steal her powers and place them inside of Lilith. Now Ophis was so weak she wasn't even listed in the top 10 strongest anymore. Of course, her weakness was all relative. She was still more powerful than just about everyone else. Would that work? Asked Naruto. What do you mean? Asked Ophis with a frown. Let's say you regain your powers. You would once again become the number 1 strongest being in the world. Hades has used the power of the Ark, so anyone who is ranked among the strongest beings in the world cannot fight him. Would you be able to fight Hades despite this? Yes. Ophis answered with such confidence that Naruto had to raise an eyebrow, but she had an answer ready for him. I won't regain my place among the top 10 strongest beings in the world for at least an hour after I regain my power. It shouldn't be too difficult to defeat the Alliance of Hell during that time. Speaking of, how do you plan to regain your lost power? Asked Shiva. Naruto is going to help me. Everyone turned to look at Naruto. Seeing so many people staring at him caused him to scratch his cheek in an almost embarrassed manner. After what happened to Ophis, she and I have been working together to think of a way for her to reclaim her power. What we came up with was a seal that can be used to transfer power from one person to another. Everyone raised an eyebrow at Naruto. Even Rias and the other people who knew him best looked fairly shocked by his announcement. You can create a seal that transfers power? Asked Indra, leaning forward in interest. Naruto shrugged. Yes, though different people would require different seals. The seal I created for Ophis is one that works specifically with her power and no one else's. There are also several issues with this seal. The first is that both Ophis and Lilith must remain inside of the seal for it to work. If either of them leaves the seal while it's active, then the seal will break down and stop working, and I'll have to redraw it all over again. That reminds me. This seal is something that I have to place down in advance of using it. I'll have to find a place inside of Agrias where I can draw the seal, then have someone lead Lilith into the room with it. Seals were complicated in nature, and the one Naruto had created was probably his most complex seal ever. It was even more complex than the reversed sealing jutsu he created to summon Kurama with his full power. In other words, you won't be able to enter the battle until after you've helped Ophis reclaim her power, which means we can't rely on you for the beginning of the battle, Michael mused. That will make this fight considerably harder, Sirzek said with a sigh. Naruto was another of their aces. Without him to battle their enemies' more powerful members, they would have to rely on people who were weaker. To make matters worse, Sirzek, Ajuka, Shiva, Indra, and Brahma were all unable to fight against members from the Alliance of Hell thanks to their use of the Ark of the Covenant. Even the top 10 strongest beings in the world were unable to disobey a command from the Ark. That meant there were several very powerful enemies who their forces could not match. I can deal with at least one of the members from the Alliance of Hell. Cyraorg raised his hand. In fact, let me battle against Hades. I'm not so sure that's a good idea, Sirzek mumbled. I'm not stupid enough to believe I can defeat him, Cyraorg said. I know my limits. But I think I can at least hold him off long enough for Naruto and Ophis to finish dealing with Lilith. And we will take on Thanatos, Zeus said with a gesture toward himself and Poseidon. I actually believe we are strong enough to defeat Thanatos. We know all of his powers and abilities. I guess that's too, but we also need someone who can fight against Nyx and Angra Mainyu, Sirzek said. You can leave Angra Mainyu to me and my brave saints, Michael said at last. Michael was not one of the top 10 strongest beings, but neither was Angra Mainyu. Naruto didn't know who between the two was stronger. However, he was certain that Michael could defeat the Persian god if Dulio and Irina were by his side. In that case, I suppose the rest of us will divide ourselves up and take on the strongest members of the Chaos Brigade, Sirzek said at last. I am going to fight that Yami character, Indra said as if it was already a foregone conclusion. He stared at everyone present as if daring them to disagree. Sirzek looked at Naruto. Are you okay with that? Naruto frowned, then shrugged. I doubt Indra will be able to beat Yami, but if he can hold him off long enough for me to help Ophis regain her power, then I don't mind him trying. Hey, that sounds like a challenge to me, Indra said. Take it however you want. All right. Fine, but if I do manage to beat Yami, then you can bet your ass I'll be taking all that power he's got for myself. Naruto almost snorted. As if stealing someone else's power would be so easy. The only reason he and Ophis would be able to claim the power from Yami and Lilith was because those two were a part of them. Indra could spout whatever nonsense he wanted, but there was no way he would be able to steal Yami's power. The rest of the meeting continued along in this vein. Devil Ninja. Agrias was a floating city in the sky, which meant in order to capture it, they would need to lead an aerial assault. It was a bright morning with a clear sky. The artificial sun shone down from overhead, creating long shadows along the ground as its luminous rays struck the army standing on the plains of the underworld. An encampment had been set up on these plains, built using the technology created by the combined minds of Ajuka and Azazel. Unlike a normal camp, which would have relied on tarps and such made from hide and artificial fabrics, this one was composed of artificial cement made through magical means. All the buildings were uniform in shape and color. They were shaped like standard rectangles exactly 2 meters in size, all of them except for the command center. It sat in the center of the encampment, a structure twice the size of every other and shaped like a dome. Naruto found himself standing inside of this command structure with Rias Gremory and many other important figures. Cyroorg was with them as well, as were Michael, Sirzex, Azazel, Ajuka, Seraphal, Indra, Brahma, Shiva, Poseidon, and Zeus. There were so many people present that the command center, large though it may have been, felt a little cramped. "You all know the plan," Sirzex said, "so I don't believe there's a need to go over it again. However, if you have any last-minute questions, ask them now. There won't be time once the fighting starts." "I've got a question." Indra stood with his arms crossed and the same dastardly smirk he always wore. "What are we going to do about the overwhelming numbers we're up against? I don't want to put a rein on anyone's parade, but even though we've managed to scrounge together an army of 100,000, we're going up against at least 10 times that many enemies." Naruto was surprised by the logical question, but then he remembered Indra was a war god. It was only natural he would understand the intricacies of war like the back of his hand. He just didn't expect those words to come from someone so arrogant. Sirzex did not seem surprised by the question as he answered in a calm voice. "While they do have numbers on their side, I believe our forces are superior in every other way. Our army has quality over quantity. Besides, the goal of our army is not to defeat the enemy forces, but to keep them off us so we can take care of the Chaos Brigade's leaders." "Fair enough," Indra conceded. "This is not a question, but more of a statement," Shiva suddenly said. "Go ahead," said Sirzex. "I will not be taking part in this battle unless Trihexa is fully resurrected," Shiva announced. His words caused a shocked ripple to spread through their group. Shiva was the most powerful among them, ranked as the #1 strongest being in the entire world. To have him not participate was a huge blow to their fighting power. "Can I ask why you've decided not to fight?" asked Azazel. Shiva smiled. "The reason is simply because I am not interested in this battle. I am here because Brahma asked me to be here, but I have no real investment in what happens. That said, I do believe it would be bad if Trihexa were unleashed upon this world, so I'll step in only if that happens and not a moment before." He paused, then added, "I may also step in the event that the unlikely happens." Everyone wanted to argue with him, but it was clear from the uninterested look in Shiva's eyes that nothing they said would convince him. "That's fine," Sirzex said at last. "Please help us if Trihexa fully awakens." Of course. While Shiva's decision not to participate was a blow, it didn't change their course of action. Sirzex spent the next few minutes talking about Agrias, then dismissed everyone. Naruto left with Rias and Cyroorg. As he emerged from the command center, he looked up and into the distance, where the floating island of Agrias was visible. Currently about the size of his fist, the island was surrounded by a massive swarm of enemies, a mixture of devils, dragons, magicians, fallen, and grim reapers. The fact that grim reapers were present within the army disturbed Naruto as it proved the Alliance of Hell was currently working alongside the Chaos Brigade. Whether this was a permanent alliance or just temporary Naruto couldn't say, but he wasn't sure it mattered either. Either way, it meant more trouble for them. "It seems the upcoming battle is going to be pretty intense," Cyroorg said. "Most battles are," said Rias. She sighed. "Though I do think this one will be a lot harder than any other I've fought. There's a lot riding on our success, and we have a lot more to lose." They walked through the encampment. Naruto turned his head to watch the people rushing around on all sides. This place was a hotbed of activity, with people moving supplies, issuing orders, or making food for hungry soldiers. Numerous scents filled the air. Sweat intermingled with the spices and herbs from food and alcohol. It reminded Naruto of the Allied Shinobi Forces' bases right before the Fourth Great Shinobi War. Naruto looked at a group sitting on a bench not far from them, a mixture of angels, devils, and fallen angels. They looked to be sharing a drink. The devil had a large mug of ale. The fallen was drinking some kind of martini, and the angel had a red wine. Despite being from completely different species that had been at war with each other for centuries, they were now getting along and sharing drinks. It was a calming sight. "I'd better find my peerage. I'll see you guys later," Cyroorg said. He waved at them as he left. "We should find the others too," said Rias. "You're right," Naruto agreed. Finding their group wasn't that hard. The members of Rias's peerage were with Sona's group. It looked like Issei and Saji were locked in the middle of an arm wrestling match, and the various members of the two peerages were goading their teammate on. "Come on, Saji. Put your back into it, don't lose to him, Eyes. You can do it, Eyes. Saji. If you know what's good for you, then you won't lose. Eyes, if you win, I will fuck you into a coma." Naruto would have shaken his head at those words, but they seemed to give Issei an incredible surge of strength. With a sound that made Naruto think his friend was screaming, "Oppai!" Issei threw Saji's arm down, thus winning the match. "Damn it! What kind of sick pervert power is that?" asked Saji. "It's the Oppai Dragon's pervert power, that's what," Issei shouted with enthusiasm. While Naruto didn't look disappointed by the events that had transpired, Rias sighed as she walked over to the group. She wore a dry and resigned smile. "It's nice to see everyone is able to remain despite the fact that we'll be going to war soon." "Bucko, did the meeting end?" asked Kiba. "Just now," Rias replied. "How'd it go?" asked Revel. "Nothing really happened, it was just going over what we already knew." "When is the attack taking place?" asked Sona. While Sona and Rias were technically of equal status, Rias had a much higher position in this army thanks to her many accomplishments on the battlefield. Every situation they had faced was won in part thanks to Rias and her strategies. Of course, quite a few of her strategies came from Revel, but it was Rias herself who had implemented many of them. "Tomorrow at dawn. That means you should all get some rest before the big battle begins," Rias said not just to Sona, but to everyone. They all shared a meal from one of the workstations. Kaneko and Revel fought for a place on Naruto's lap. Rias watched them with an amused smile, and Irina and Roswise tried hard to pretend they didn't care while glaring enviously at the two girls out of the corner of their eyes. Even Lefei kept sneaking glances at him. It felt like almost nothing had changed. Only Naruto seemed to notice one of their group was missing. That was why, after dinner, Naruto went off in search of Ophis. He found the immortal dragon disguised as a girl standing on a cliffside not far from the encampment. She was staring off into the distance. It looked like she was observing Agrias, but he knew her gaze was on something else entirely, something that wasn't visible to anyone but her. "You missed dinner," he said as he stood beside her. "That's okay. I'll just ask you to feed me your cum later," Ophis said with a bland expression. "I'm not sure that will be enough to fill you up, but sure, later though." Naruto paused, allowing a small silence to stretch out between them. "Are you nervous?" "A little," Ophis confessed. "In all the many centuries I have been alive, this is the first time something like this has ever happened to me. I did not even realize it was possible for my powers to be taken like this. And now that I am on the cusp of reclaiming them, I'm beginning to wonder if it is even possible. I keep asking myself questions I have never asked before. What will happen if I lose? What will I do if I can't regain my powers? When I begin to ask these questions, I get scared." Ophis wrapped her arms around her body. It was a vulnerable expression, something he had never seen on her before. Even after losing her powers, Ophis had still remained supremely confident in herself. He wondered if her battle against Hades had caused her to feel this way. "If your powers can be taken away, they can be returned as well," Naruto told her. "That's what Kurama says." "Kurama," Ophis sighed. "That fox of yours is very intelligent and powerful. I wonder how he would fare in this world if he wasn't sealed inside of you. He would probably become one of the world's greatest superpowers. I imagine he might even become deified and go on to form his own country." "Absolutely not. That sounds like such a hassle." The words echoed inside of Naruto's mind and caused him to smile. However, he did not respond to them. Instead, he placed a hand on Ophi's shoulder and pulled her to him. Seeking his comfort, his warmth, Ophis closed her eyes and leaned into him. Tomorrow would be a big day, a day of battle and bloodshed, of death and destruction. But for now, this moment was about him comforting one of the women he loved. Devil Ninja. Naruto snapped from his sleep to awake as the sound of an explosion nearly ruptured his ear. He threw himself off the bed and raised a barrier seconds before the shockwave struck his barracks, tearing it to shreds within seconds. Several screams echoed beside him, but he could hardly hear them, for the pounding of blood in his ears and the loud roaring of flames filled his eardrums. Even after the shockwave swept over and past them, the sounds didn't die down, they continued. Naruto didn't need a second glance to notice why. Meteors were raining down from the sky. It was an aerial bombardment. "Those are being conjured by magicians," Rias exclaimed. "It looks like they decided not to wait for us to arrive at Agrias and took the attack to us," Revel added. All of Naruto's women had been sleeping with him that night, so they were all present now. Rias and Ophis, who always slept nude, changed into their outfits using magic. The others like Kaneko and Revel were forced to strip out of their pajamas and change outfits fast. They were fortunate Naruto had stored their clothing in a storage scroll. Roswise was lucky. Her armor was located in a storage space. All she needed to do was summon it. "What should we do?" asked Irina. "The only thing we can do," Rias said grimly. "Let's meet up with the others and push our enemies back." No one disagreed with Rias's decision. They left the destroyed remains of their barracks and rushed across the battlefield. The darkness of night was lit up by the numerous fires that waged across the camp, allowing them to see how truly horrendous what was happening was. After the bombardment of magical meteors struck, Grim Reapers had descended under the cover of night and were attacking en masse. Many of their forces lay slain and more were dying. Naruto gritted his teeth as he saw one unfortunate devil's head leave his shoulders as a scythe cleaved through it. "Naruto, take defense. Revel, move on the take, cover her with your magic, Roswise. Kaneko, Irina, charge through." Rias directed them as a group, commanding one of them to attack and the others to defend. Naruto found himself working as part of a unit. He used his ninja wire to tie up any enemies that came too close, while Revel finished them off with her phoenix fire. Kaneko relied on her sturdy rook defense and Tuki to act as a shield. She took several attacks head-on and even let a scythe shatter against her body before Roswise and Lefei created hundreds of magic circles on that side that unleashed a literal bombardment of various kinds of magic. They had to be careful, though, for in this chaotic melee were many of their comrades. Naruto soon discovered it wasn't just the Grim Reapers who were attacking when a large sphere with numerous tentacles appeared overhead. Several tentacles struck figures down below, impaling them, causing them to dissolve. Even more were absorbed by the shadows that Tartarus manipulated. "This isn't good," Rias said. "If Tartarus is here, then it means Angramainyu, Erebus, Nyx, and Hades are here too. Let's hurry up and find Aiz and the others," Naruto said. Searching the chaotic battlefield for Issei and their other companions wasn't as hard as they first assumed. A massive explosion clearly created by Issei's famous dragon shot blasted a large hole in the enemy formation, and they followed the point where it appeared to its source. Issei was fighting alongside the rest of their peerage, decked in scale mail. Beside him was Asia, who was healing people at a distance, and protecting them both was Akano, Kiba, Zenovia, Gasper, and Rainier. "Aiz!" Rias shouted. "Bucko, Naruto, I'm glad to see everyone else is okay," Issei shouted. "Thank God you made it to us," Asia added, clasping her hands as though praying. "We need to find Searzex and the other alliance leaders," Rias said, taking command of the situation the moment she appeared. "I'm sure this attack's purpose is removing them from the playing field. My brother and the others are incapable of fighting against the Alliance of Hell thanks to the Ark." "I think you might be right," Kiba added. "If that's the case, we should definitely go now before something happens to them." Zenovia said with a grave expression. "Fuck, this day has just gone from bad to worse," Rainier grumbled in complaint. Rias had been correct in her assumption that the Alliance of Hell was after the three faction leaders. They found Azazel, Barakiel, Shemazai, Metatron, Michael, Gabriel, Zeus, and Poseidon fighting against Hades, Erebus, and Nyx. It was hard to tell who was winning. Hades laughed as he wielded his staff with surprising grace for a skeleton. He blocked an attack from Poseidon's trident, then knocked a lightning bolt away from him. Azazel tried to launch an attack from behind, but it was swallowed by a mirror of darkness that appeared before it could hit. Damn that Erebus, Azazel scowled. He's weak, but he's damn good at cheap tricks. Thank you for the compliment, former Governor General of the Grigori, said Erebus, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. While they were battling against Hades, Erebus, and Nyx, Cyroorg had somehow found himself locked in combat with Angra Mainyu. Naruto didn't know how that had happened, but he could take a few guesses. Irina! Naruto shouted suddenly. Cast the brightest light you can. Wah, huh? Okay. Irina clearly didn't know why he was asking for this, but she did as suggested, gathering light into a ball within her hands, which she tossed into the air. The ball exploded into a sphere of such luminescence that all the shadows vanished. Erebus and Nyx suddenly appeared out of a shadow that was no longer present for them to hide in. Naruto and Kiba used that moment to their advantage. They flashed next to the pair, Naruto in front of Erebus and Kiba before Nyx. While Kiba's attack was dodged by Nyx, who leapt back just before the sword could strike her, Erebus was unable to avoid having a Rasengan shoved into his chest. He screamed as he was blasted backward like a rocket being launched into space. It seems we have more unwanted guests, Hades said. Unwanted for you, perhaps, Rias shot back. Hades looked like he wanted to say something, but Azazel chose that moment to attack, attempting to impale him with a spear of light. It didn't work. Hades caught the attack with his staff, then redirected it toward Barakiel, who had tried sneaking up behind him. This forced the other fallen angel to back off, lest he be impaled by his ally's weapon. Your timing is quite fortuitous, all of you. Thank you for the assistance, Michael said. Don't worry about that. More importantly, what should we do now? Asked Rias. There is no choice. We have to begin our plans now, Sirzek said. Azazel, Gabriel, Michael, Poseidon, Zeus, can I leave these four to you? Do not worry, Sirzek. We will hold off Hades and his alliance. You do what you have to, Michael said. I'm going to battle Angra Mainyu, Cyroorg announced. The two of them had been battling each other for some time now. Angra Mainyu had been creating all kinds of different element magic that he threw at Cyroorg, but each and every attack was simply punched out of the sky. Cyroorg proved why he was often hailed as the strongest devil of his generation. Man, what an unmitigated disaster this is, Indra said. A battle is happening right in front of me and I can't even fight. Sirzek, I have changed my mind, Shiva added. With what has just happened, I have decided to aid you in battle. I appreciate that. Sirzek looked more than a little relieved by this. However, now was not the time, and so he cast a spell that amplified his voice and said, Everyone, split up into two teams. Those under heaven's purview and members of the Greek pantheon shall remain here and battle against the alliance of hell. Everyone else, we attack Agrias, battle is upon us. Devil Ninja, explosions rocked the atmosphere. Bright red spheres flared into existence and wiped out whole swaths of people. Angels. Devils. Dragons. Fallens. Magicians. None could escape the destruction being perpetuated in midair as both sides slung spells at each other with what seemed like little regard. An angel launched a spear of brilliant golden light that flew forward, impaled a devil from the old Satan faction, and sent the now dead man tumbling through the sky. Before he had time to celebrate his victory, however, a spinning disk of compressed magical energy sliced the angel in half from the waist. The last look on the angel's face was one of shock before the two separate halves of his body flew in different directions. A little ways over, a devil was locked in a vicious struggle with a grim reaper. The two seemed evenly matched as they attacked each other with scythe and sword. Their blades flashed with a brilliant gleam of silver in the light. It wasn't long before their blades locked and they struggled to overpower the other, but when it became obvious neither side was going to win, they pushed back and floated away from each other. And then they both went up in a brilliant explosion. The attack that had hit them was a stray attack from another battle taking place not far away. Two people of high rank were fighting. One of them was Mephistopheles, who caused the air to ignite with a snap of his fingers. His opponent, a man dressed in a dark robe decorated with ornaments and a clown mask on his face, swung the scythe in his hands and cut the wave of flames in half. Had this attack been launched by anyone else, perhaps that would have ended things. But the wave of flames soon scattered and each errant strand transformed into a bird. The birds congregated around the Grim Reaper and flew at him with the obvious intent of destruction. The Grim Reaper had no such plans to let that happen, however, and he spun around once more, swinging his scythe so fast it was a mere blur as he cut down every bird attacking before they could so much as touch his robes. You are quite powerful, Pluto. I can see why you are Hades' prized Grim Reaper. HMPH. Don't try and flatter me, old devil. I'm not in the mood. Oh, dear. That's quite the temper. Why don't we see if we can't fix your attitude? Mephisto swung his arm and unleashed a powerful arc of lightning, which Pluto tried to cut in half, but it soon turned into a lasso that wrapped around him and bound his arms to his side. Rather than let himself be defeated, Pluto spun like a top and let his scythe glide along his body. The way it danced around him even while he wasn't holding it was impressive. The lightning lasso was sliced to pieces. The battle between Mephisto and Pluto was but one of many battles taking place around Agrias, and navigating that battlefield was none other than Naruto, Rias, Ophis, and Issei. While everyone else was battling, their goal was to infiltrate Agrias. They flew through the battlefield, doing their best to skirt around the numerous fights taking place. This is really awful, Issei shouted to be heard. War always is, Rias said, and we got separated from the others, Naruto grumbled. I hope they're okay. We need to have faith in them. They can handle themselves, said Rias in a reassuring voice, though he didn't know if she was trying to reassure him or herself. It wasn't long before they landed on Agrias. Even in the middle of the city, the battling was heavy. Naruto could not help but feel pained as he looked at the gutted-out buildings burning with supernatural flames. Several of the buildings had already been toppled. Death and destruction lay everywhere he looked. You remember the plan? Rias asked Issei. Issei nodded. His usual goofy expression was nowhere to be found. He instead looked like a man on a mission, a man who would stop at nothing to accomplish his goals. I'm supposed to meet up with Team Valley, find Rizavam, and rescue my parents. That's right. Our plans are in shambles thanks to the surprise attack late last night, and we lost track of Sirzex early on in the battle, but our mission hasn't changed. Remember not to get caught up in any battles. We don't know what Rizavam plans to do with your parents, but I doubt it will be pleasant. Make sure you hurry up and meet with Valley. Don't worry, bucko. I won't fail to rescue my parents. Good luck. Issei was already wearing his scale mail, though he had yet to change into any of his more powerful forms. The booster jets on his back ignited as he took off at supersonic speeds. He didn't bother engaging in any of the enemies that noticed him and instead traveled toward the center of the city. Naruto turned to Ophis. Can you find Lilith? He asked. Ophis tilted her head left, then right. She closed her eyes. While nothing seemed to have changed, Naruto had the sense that she was searching for her power. The power emitting from Lilith belonged to Ophis, so she should be able to locate it with ease, even if Lilith was doing her best to remain hidden. She's not in the battle, Ophis said at last, opening her eyes. She is located deep underground. I suspect she is guarding the complex housing Trihexa. That's so? Then I guess we also need to head underground, Naruto said. I won't be able to follow you, Rias said with a sad smile. One of us needs to find the others and lead them. Think you'll be okay on your own? We'll be fine, Naruto said with a confident grin. Don't worry about us. It's when you say lines like that when I worry the most, Rias said. Naruto would have given her one of his signature comebacks, but Rias left him and Ophis soon after. Now on their own, the two quickly made a beeline for where Ophis sensed her power coming from. They soon discovered a building that looked like a research center. The building was an example of postmodernism, with an asymmetrical aesthetic that made Naruto think the designer was one of those crazy Americans he heard so much about. It was also one of the few buildings that didn't have anyone around it. There is a magic barrier set up around this building, Ophis said. Can you dispel it? Asked Naruto. Ophis shook her head. Not at my current power level, but I won't have to. Naruto didn't know what she meant at first, but Indra chose that moment to appear before them. He had his back to them, arms crossed in his typical pose, and was wearing the same outfit as always. Unlike pretty much everyone else who had chosen to don armor, he was wearing his Hawaiian t-shirt and board shorts. It made him look kind of ridiculous. So this is the entrance into Agrisa's underground lab, Indra said with his classic smirk. Hey. Good job finding this place, brats. Now leave entering this building to me. Naruto withheld a grimace as intense power welled up around Indra. There was a crackling hum in the air, which caused the hairs on Naruto's arms to prickle. This must have been Indra's divine aura. Naruto had heard from Sirzax that Indra was so powerful it would take all the current Saiyans fighting together just to rival him. He didn't know how true that was, but feeling his power now, he was inclined to believe it. The intense wellspring of power was soon channeled into an object on Indra's person, which Naruto soon realized was the legendary relic often spoken of in Indra's specific mythology. Vajra. It was a divine weapon that let Indra command lightning that was superior to even Barakiel's famous holy lightning. A long and powerful bolt of lightning flew from Indra and slammed into the researching building, or at least the barrier surrounding the building. Sparks crackled all along the surface. The barrier seemed to hold for a moment, but then cracks began appearing. Seconds later, the barrier was unable to remain cohesive and shattered. And that's that. Indra clapped his hands, grinned, and turned to give Naruto a challenging stare. I hope you don't mind, but I'm going on ahead. Feel free, Naruto said dismissively. Indra chuckled, whether because he was amused by Naruto's response or something else. Naruto didn't know. He didn't really want to know. This god really pissed him off for reasons not even Naruto understood. As Indra disappeared into the building, he turned to Ophis. We should go inside too. We need to find Lilith. Yes. Naruto and Ophis entered the research building, which possessed a vague resemblance to a traditional hospital. While the entrance was definitely a lobby, the rest of the building consisted of long hallways with glass windows that displayed numerous research rooms. A lot of these rooms contained devices Naruto had never seen before. He couldn't even begin to guess at their purpose. There were no enemies in this building. That would have been disturbing on any other occasion, but Naruto realized the reason was simply because there was no need to station troops here. Lilith was somewhere inside of this building. There was not a soul alive right now who could defeat her in combat. I found her, Ophis said at last, pointing down a hallway. She is this way. After she spoke, the entire building shook like it had been struck by a giant. Naruto bent his knees to keep from falling. The familiar divine aura of Indra was erupting from up ahead, which meant, is Indra in combat with Lilith? Asked Naruto. That seems likely, said Ophis. Ha. We'll let Indra hold her off for now. I need to find a room where I can lay down my seal. What if Indra beats Lilith? Asked Ophis. Do you think he can? Not a chance. There you go. Now let's hurry up and get this done. Devil Ninja. Out of my way. Issei's arm was encased in powerful energy as he turned a normal dragon shot into something resembling an energy whip. He swung his arm, which struck several devils from the old Satan faction, tearing them in half. These old devils didn't even slow Issei down. He continued running toward the meeting point. The meeting point was in a location deep beneath Agre's surface. There were many buildings that led into the underground section of Agrea's, where essence crystals were contained. Issei had gone through one of those buildings and reached what seemed to be an underground storage chamber. There were a few people guarding this area, but he was able to deal with them easily. Issei whipped through the old Satan faction devils and soon found himself standing in front of a door. He would have kicked it in, but the door opened on its own, and when he stepped inside, he found himself standing in a room that looked like a refinement chamber. There were all kinds of big machines that looked like they were used to refine the essence crystals into something that could be used. Issei had heard the essence crystals were used to create both the evil pieces and brave saints. That was another reason Agrea's was such an important location for the three factions alliance. Without the essence crystals found on Agrea's, they were unable to create more angels and devils through reincarnation. It's been a while, Issei Hyodo. A man was standing next to a large contraption that looked like a drill, his silver hair and eyes as easily recognizable as the silver armor he wore. Divine Dividing Scale Male looked a lot like Issei's, but it had several differences like the wings and the shape of the helmet. The helmet was currently open. Valley, Issei said. Where are the others? They've joined the battle, Valley said. You're going to take the fight to Rizavam, right? I'm coming with you. I still owe my grandfather some payback. That's fine. I wouldn't bother meeting with you if I didn't need your help. Issei understood his limits, and he knew he wasn't a match for Rizavam Lucifer, who had the Sacred Gear Canceller ability. The power to nullify all Sacred Gear enchanted powers with just a touch was a broken skill that would be difficult for any Sacred Gear user to break through on their own. Good. Then let's hurry. I know where Rizavam is. He's currently holding your parents deeper inside Agrea's. Lead on. Issei didn't even question Valley as they left the room and began making their way deeper inside of Agrias. Now wasn't the time for questions. He was a man on a mission to rescue his family, and he trusted Valley, who had proven himself a friend by this point. They fought their way through several enemies. None could stand against them. Fighting against both him and Valley was like trying to stop a hurricane with a handful of toothpicks. Deeper and deeper they went, until at last the two found themselves standing inside of a room that looked nondescript, save the two humans crucified to a pair of crosses. "Mom, Dad." Issei took a step forward, but he was blocked by Valley. He would have shouted at the other boy. He didn't, however, because Rizavam was standing right next to the crosses. "Well now, isn't this a touching reunion?" asked Rizavam with a twisted grin. "Issei Hyodo, I've been waiting for you." "Eyes?" his mother asked in shock when she saw him. "Is that you?" "It's me," Issei said as he let the mask covering his face pull back. "I don't understand. What is this? Why are you dressed like that?" his mother said. "What's going on here?" asked his dad. "Nothing makes sense." Their confusion was understandable since Issei had always done his best to never let them learn about the supernatural world. He didn't want his folks getting involved in something so dangerous. Both of them were just regular humans. "Since it seems your son doesn't want you to know, allow me to tell you," Rizavam said, the grin splitting his face growing even wider. "Don't you dare, bastard," Issei roared, but it was too late. "Your son isn't human anymore. He's a devil, an evil monster who devours humans to increase his own power." Chapter 64 Jinchuriki of the Apocalypse. There's a group of fallen angels pinned down by that building over there. Kiba and Xenovia, I want you to be our spear point. Send our enemies scattering to the winds. Kaneko and Irina, you'll come in next and take down our enemies before they know what hit them. Rosweiss and Akano, shoot down any that attempt to retreat. Yes, Bucko, don't worry, Lady Rias, I got this. We'll send those monsters packing, oofufufu, this'll be fun. Several responses came to her through her communicator. Rias floated over the battlefield with Asia, Gasper, and Ravel by her side. Naruto's bishop was proving to be incredibly useful, providing her with a wealth of knowledge from across the battlefield. Thanks to Ravel, Rias was able to find out which parts of the enemy's formation was weak, which battle lines could be attacked and which were too heavily defended, and she could provide backup to those who were struggling. The area she was looking at right now was swarming with fake-scale males, so many Rias couldn't even begin to count them. A group of heavily injured fallen angels were surrounded on all sides by the fake-scale males. It was honestly a miracle they were still alive. About 4 of them were unconscious and the remaining 8 were on their last leg, battered, bruised, and covered in blood. Just then, 2 streaks of light smashed into the enemy formation. They were Kiba and Xenovia. The one who presented the opening attack was Xenovia, who swung X-Durandal with all the strength in her arms. A powerful wave of white energy erupted from the weapon, slicing clean through nearly a dozen fake-scale males and even splitting several buildings in half. Rias shook her head. The girl was lucky her aim was so good. She could have killed the people they were trying to rescue if her aim was even a millimeter off. Immediately after Xenovia's attack softened them up, Kiba raced in through the gap and began decimating the enemy ranks with precise strokes of his blade. Some of the enemies tried to use Dragon Shot against him. They shouldn't have bothered. In fact, using such an attack on a knight like Kiba was probably the dumbest thing they could have done. Kiba vanished with the speed only a knight could possess, and the dragon shots went through the spot he stood and slammed into their fellow fake-scale males. Nearly a dozen armored enemies died from friendly fire. Then Kiba appeared again, swinging his holy demonic sword with enough force to remove the heads from his enemies' shoulders. Kaneko and Irina, it's your turn. Just leave this to me, Bucko. I'll send these douches packing. I'll help out where I can. Kaneko had been standing on a building and waiting for her chance to attack. Once Rias gave the order, she leapt down from the building and descended toward the fake-scale male army. She had already released her Nekomata mode too. Her split tail and cat ears were visible and her body was covered in Tuki. As she landed on the ground, Kaneko slammed her fist into it, unleashing a powerful earthquake that knocked every enemy within 15 meters off their feet. Not one to miss an opportunity, Kaneko attacked all of the downed opponents, destroying them with strength enhanced by Tuki. A heel drop smashed open the chest of one of the scale males. She dropped onto all fours as another 2 came her way, raised herself onto her hands, and did the splits. Both legs shot out and struck the fake scale males so hard they were lifted off their feet and thrown back. Spinning around, Kaneko didn't stop with just those two. She was like a helicopter as she began kicking away any scale male that tried to come near her. With her Tuki-infused strength, she was more than capable of breaking the armored beings apart like a baker cracking eggs. One thing Rias had noticed about these fake scale males was how much weaker they were than the real thing. They could use Issei's signature attack, Dragon Shot, and they had a decent defense that could withstand attacks from a normal mid-rank devil, but they did not have much else. Her own forces were far more powerful and capable of taking down multiple fake scale males without breaking a sweat. Kaneko wasn't the only one kicking ass. Irina had swooped down at the same time as her, but where the little Nekusho was a force of destruction, Irina was a finesse fighter. She created a lance made of light and impaled a fake scale male through the chest. She didn't bother removing it. Letting go, she created a sword as she kicked the lance to bury it even more deeply into her foe, then spun around and sliced a dragon shot in half. The light sword in her hand swiftly changed shape into a spear, which she threw at the fake scale male. The creature swatted the weapon away, but Irina used its distracted state to close the distance. She cleaved the fake scale male in half after summoning a holy sword that Rias didn't recognize. "Rias, there are several evil dragons coming this way," Ravel suddenly said. "Where are they coming from?" asked Rias. "Our left flanks and behind us. There are two separate forces." "How far out are they?" "They'll be here in about 5 minutes." Rias didn't doubt Ravel's information. She was keeping track of everything happening on the battlefield by listening to the various conversations happening across the battlefield. That was how they had been able to discover these injured fallen angels. The question was, what did she do with this information? "Do you two think you could hold off one of those groups for a short period of time?" I don't know if I'll be able to hold off a bunch of evil dragons, but I'll do my best," Gasper said. "After all, I'm a man of the Gremory household too." Ravel looked uncertain. "How long do I need us to hold them off?" "Not long," Rias assured her before speaking into her communicator. "Change of plans, everyone. There are two groups of evil dragons heading this way. Rosweiss, Akano. I need you both to help Ravel hold off one group." She waited to receive an affirmative from them both, then turned to Asia. Now would be a good time to summon Fafnir. "Right." Asia clasped her hands together as if in prayer, but this was no normal praying. A dragon gate soon appeared before her. From within the gate emerged a massive dragon with brilliant golden scales. He was at least 10 meters long and had no wings on his back. Perhaps the oddest thing about this dragon was the cloth wrapped around its horn. The cloth was, in fact, Asia's panties. "Fafnir-san, can you please protect me from the evil dragons?" "Of course, fair maiden. Do you have them, my treasures, as payment?" "I do." After saying those words, Asia removed a pair of panties from her nun's habit. Rias knew the girl always kept some on her person now. Of course, the sight of Asia giving a massive dragon her panties while said massive dragon sniffed them like a typical pervert was a bit surreal. But Rias had long since learned to put up with the strangeness of her peerage. Dealing with Naruto on a daily basis helped. "Very well. I shall protect thee, fair maiden. You may count on me." "Thank you, Fafnir-san." With the giant golden dragon now protecting Asia, Rias didn't fear for the girl's safety, and so she turned to face the incoming horde of evil dragons. The group coming in from behind consisted of 3 evil dragons. Each one was about 10 meters in size, putting them in the same class as Fafnir. One had red scales, one had orange scales, and the last had green scales. She didn't know if their scale color signified something, but she decided it didn't matter in the end. All she could do was fight with everything she had. Taking a deep breath, Rias allowed her demonic power to flow through her. Then she directed it and created a single sphere. It was small, barely the size of her fist, but it crackled with repressed power. She added more power. It tried to grow in size, but Rias quickly suppressed it. Once her highly mobile sphere had what she deemed was enough power, she sent it at the dragons coming her way. Ruin the Extinct was a skill that her brother had created and mastered. Also known as demonic bullets of annihilation, it was the ability to shape the power of destruction into numerous, highly mobile spheres that were able to eliminate anything it touched without leaving a single trace behind. Rias did not have her brother's mastery over this technique, and she could only make one bullet, but she could control that single bullet with enough precision to move it wherever and however she wanted. The evil dragons saw her attack coming and decided to evade it rather than face it. Perhaps they sensed the massive wellspring of power packed inside that tiny sphere. Unfortunately for them, Rias moved the sphere as they tried to dodge. Her attack struck the wing of the green-scaled dragon, which caused the creature to cry out in pain as the wing disappeared. With only one wing left, the dragon was unable to maintain lift, and it crashed into the ground far below. Rias put the dragon out of her mind and focused on the remaining two. By this point, the two dragons had already closed the distance, and so she was no longer able to use long-range attacks. Darting backward with a flap of her wings, Rias called upon the power of destruction once more, but this time she encased it around her body, forming a type of armor that vaguely resembled the armor her brother wore. Searsex was able to use a power called human-shaped aura of destruction. What he did was convert himself into the power of destruction. By fully releasing his powers, he could cause earthquakes throughout the underworld. The amount of power he had was 10 times greater than the original Lucifer while he was in this form. There was a problem with it, however. Because he could not fully control this form, the power of destruction would spread without his command, which meant he could kill his allies as easily as his enemies. Rias could not do that. She did not have her brother's power or talent. Instead, she had created an armored form by using Issei's scale mail as a base, but she shaped it like Searsex's armor. This gave her increased defenses and forced anyone attacking her to be wary of annihilating themselves. One of the dragons released a powerful blast of fire from its mouth. The plume of flame slammed into Rias, but it did not penetrate her armor. Instead, the blackish-red armor destroyed the attack before it could touch her. Rias could feel her demonic energy depleting with the successful defense, however, which proved to her that this ability was still incomplete. It also meant she needed to hurry. Creating a sword from the power of destruction, Rias flew forward far faster than she ever had before, swung the weapon with all her might, and watched in grim satisfaction as her sword tore through the dragon's back with ease. Scales split. Blood flowed. The dragon released a cry of agony as it lost control of its ability to fly and began plummeting. Rias would have gone after it, to finish it off, but the other dragon released a compressed ball of fire that slammed into her back. While her armor destroyed the attack, force was enough to push her into an uncontrolled spin. Gritting her teeth, Rias spun around and willed her sword to change into a bolt of pure energy, which she sent hurtling at the dragon. Sadly, this dragon appeared to have wizened up to her attacks and dodged. She grimaced. This fight might be a little harder than the others. This dragon wasn't any more powerful than the other mass-produced evil dragons, but it did seem a little wiser. She sent several attacks its way and watched in consternation as each one was dodged. However, Rias wasn't just sending out attacks without thinking. She could still control the power of destruction even after it left her hands, and she quickly willed the various attacks she sent to surround the dragon, who realized too late what her intentions were. Rias smiled grimly as she stretched out her hand and closed it into a fist. Almost as if that was the signal, all the reddish-black bolts of destructive energy converged on the dragon, who had no room to dodge. The evil dragon vanished as if it had never existed. Rias released a tired breath, but she knew that now wasn't the time to let exhaustion get the best of her. Akino, Gasper, Revel, and Rosweiss were currently fighting against almost a dozen evil dragons themselves. Gasper was using Forbidden Blur View to freeze several evil dragons in place, which allowed Akino, Revel, and Rosweiss to blast them with magic at their leisure. While they seemed to be holding their own, it was her duty to help her peerage when they were in trouble. And yet, just before she could move to help them, a loud dragon's roar that nearly shattered her eardrums echoed all around them. In shock, Rias spun around to find two more dragons heading their way. One of them was a black eastern dragon that was at least 75 meters in length. Gems adorned its body, all of which released a shimmering, silvery glow. There were 3 eyes on his head that released the same glow as the gems. An ominous aura exuded from his body. The second enemy was a giant dragon with 3 heads and 6 wings. His scales were a very dark shade of purple. He was not as large as the other dragon, being only around 20 meters or so, but that was still many times larger than Rias herself. That's Apophis and Azidahaka. Rias gawked when she saw the two, but her brows soon furrowed. No, Azidahaka is dead and that's too small to be Apophis. What is going on here? Rias knew she would get no answers to this question. It wasn't like her enemies were going to say anything. Case in point, the Apophis lookalike opened its mouth and fired bullets of pitch-black water at her. With a flap of her wings, Rias quickly began dodging the attacks that came her way, but just like she could control her power of destruction, this Apophis lookalike was able to control the volumes of water he launched. The spheres swerved around and tried to strike from her blind spot. It was only thanks to her training with Naruto and the others that she sensed the attacks and dodged in time. It was at this moment that the Azidahaka lookalike swooped in. A lightning bolt flew from one of its heads. Rias swerved aside to avoid it, but then something incredibly powerful struck her in the side. She screamed in pain as the armor she'd been wearing nearly dissolved. Apophis's primordial water was so deadly it could dissolve anything it touched. It was similar in some ways to her power of destruction, but this lookalike's power was clearly on another level from her own, which was why it overpowered her. Rias screamed in shock and pain as she began spiraling toward the ground. The air whistled around her. She thought she heard several people shouting, but she could barely hear what was being said over the pain ripping through her. While the attack had hurt, Rias gritted her teeth and flapped her wings, slowing down her momentum and changing the direction of her flight at the last possible second. She flew down the road. The Apophis and Azidahaka lookalikes were hot on her heels. She was forced to swerve left, right, left, and perform a series of intense aerial maneuvers to avoid being struck again. She couldn't afford to get hit even one more time. "Rias, are you okay?" Revel's voice came over her communicator. "I am, fine. How about you? We're holding out. We managed to save the fallen angels. Hang on. We're coming to help you now." That meant they were able to defeat the mass-produced evil dragons without her help. That was good. She should have had more faith in them. Akano, Revel, and Rosweiss had been working hard to get stronger. Plus they had Fafnir, who was more than a match for any mass-produced evil dragon. I should really worry about my own situation. Rias swerved aside just as a ball of primordial water nearly slammed into her back. It struck the ground instead and caused the entire road to dissolve. She ground her teeth together, put on a burst of speed, and tried to outpace the two evil dragons. Only to gasp in shock when the Azidahaka lookalike appeared right in front of her. First a rift formed, then the dragon in question emerged from it. Despite being shocked, Rias was able to react quickly, creating a sword from her power of destruction as she swerved around a cyclone of curses. She reached the massive dragon, swung the sword, and sliced into its arm. She gritted her teeth and put more strength into her arms, successfully shearing through it, though she was unable to celebrate her success. Something powerful slammed into her front. Rias screamed again as she flew backward, though her scream was silenced when she struck the ground and rolled across it. Groaning, she tried to stand up, only to scream once more when her legs became completely encased in ice. This wasn't Apophis's attack. Only Azidahaka could have done this. She looked up to see the two dragons closing in on her, one from the sky and another from the ground. Knowing better than to just sit still, she released her power of destruction to annihilate the ice covering her body, but the moment she did, more ice formed, and it formed even faster than before. A chill seeped into her body, zapping her strength. Is this the end? Time seemed to slow as the dragons closed in. I can't die here, can I? The Apophis lookalike opened his mouth, darkness gathering inside, coalescing into a tightly packed ball filled with so much energy it made her shiver. I don't want to die, I still have so much I want to do. It was getting harder to think. She was cold. So cold that all she wanted to do was sleep. Her eyes began shutting, her body slumping, and her mind growing dim. Rias tried to fight this feeling, but it was no use. Just when she felt like she was going to succumb, a loud bang, like something detonating in her ear, echoed all around Rias. She blinked as a massive imprint in the shape of a fist formed on the dragon's chest. The Apophis lookalike reared its head back and screamed as black blood poured from the now broken scales. Rias could only stare at the wound in shock, wondering what had happened. HMPH. What a weakling, a voice said. Rias turned her head. Standing before her was a tall man wearing a black coat. His long hair was a combination of black and blonde, and he had heterochromatic eyes, one gold and the other black. While his body was quite slender, Rias did not delude herself into thinking this made him weak. She knew who this person was. Aren't you, Krom Kruok? That is right, the man said. And you are Rias Gremory. I don't understand. Why are you helping me? Why are you even here? I thought you were sealed away. Crom Cruach looked at the ice covering her leg, then released a soft breath. Rias almost screamed when flames erupted from his mouth and covered her legs. The only reason she didn't scream was because the ice around her legs melted and the flames vanished not long after. Ha! Did you really think I would let myself be sealed up? I beat up my guards and escaped the moment I could. As for why I'm helping you, Crom Cruach eyed her for a second in contemplation, then shrugged. Let's just say I'm returning the favor I owe your boyfriend. Rias didn't understand and tried to ask Crom Cruach what he meant by that, but the evil dragon didn't answer and instead looked at the Apophis and Azidahaka lookalikes with a frown. Now that is interesting, he murmured. What? Asked Rias. Snorting, Crom Cruach seemed to consider this question worth answering. These aren't the original Apophis and Azidahaka. They're nothing more than clones created by the Holy Grail. They're like the mass-produced dragons you people have been fighting in many ways. Both lack the power of the originals, but I suppose they still have more than enough power to contend with normal devils. So that was why they were smaller than the original Apophis and Azidahaka. Rias had thought there was something odd about these two, but she hadn't considered they were just clones of the originals. All right. Just leave this to me, Crom Cruach said as he rotated his shoulder cuffs and slowly walked toward the two evil dragon clones. Neither of the clones seemed intelligent. They roared and launched an attack at Crom Cruach, but he swatted both attacks away as if they were mere bugs. Then he threw a fist. It was just a simple punch, and he wasn't even close enough for the attack to hit, but somehow, his attack still struck Azidahaka, reducing his middle head to a bleeding pulp. Rias could only stare in shock. Bucko! Several people shouted as they descended toward her. It was her peerage along with Revel Phoenix. Kiba landed beside her and held out a hand. She accepted the help, allowing him to pull her up. Are you okay? Asked Kiba. I'm fine, Rias assured him, though her body was still feeling sore. Asia must have sensed this, because the young nun quickly came over and activated Twilight Healing to repair the damage done by the Apophis and Azidahaka clones. Thank you, Asia. You're welcome, Asia said. What's going on over there? Asked Akano. Is that Crom Cruach? Why is he fighting those evil dragons? Also, wasn't Azidahaka defeated? Those are just clones, Rias answered. And I don't know why Crom Cruach is helping us. The battle between Crom Cruach and the two evil dragon clones was already underway. Loud explosions rang out as Crom Cruach zipped around the two evil dragon clones with speed that could easily match any knight. He appeared before Apophis and struck him in the chest with a punch enhanced by his dragon aura. It was such a powerful strike that the scales around the evil dragon's chest ruptured. At that moment, Azidahaka tried to encase Crom Cruach in a prison of ice, but of course the most powerful among the evil dragons shattered it like it was fragile porcelain. The heterochromatic-eyed dragon released another blast of fire from his mouth, but this flame was far more potent than the one he used to melt the ice on Rias's legs. They engulfed Azidahaka, causing his scales to melt, his eyes to burst into viscous fluid, and the ground around him to turn a molten yellow. Crom Cruach soon stopped breathing fire and stood in place with his arms crossed. He seemed completely nonchalant about what had just happened, but Rias and her peerage were in shock. He had handily defeated two dragons that would have given her entire peerage trouble. Rias shivered. To think Naruto had gone up against and defeated this man. But perhaps even more shocking than Crom Cruach's incredible prowess was what happened to Azidahaka. The melted scales and burst eyes began reforming. It was like someone had decided to rewind time. Rias had never seen anything quite like it. Even Naruto's healing factor was nowhere near this potent. Oh ho! It seems you can regenerate. That is interesting. You lack the power of a heavenly dragon, but your ability to regenerate is very impressive. I guess that means I'll need to get more serious. Crom Cruach cracked his neck and knuckles as he prepared to battle against the two evil dragon clones. What should we do, Bucko? Asked Gasper. Let's leave this to Crom Cruach, Revel said before Rias could. In the meantime, we should see about helping the western battlefront. I've told Sirzex and the other alliance leaders are currently locked in a battle against the real remaining high-ranked members of the Chaos Brigade and are unable to help. That's a good idea, Rias agreed. Everyone, let's go help the others. Her peerage nodded once, and they soon left the battlefield between Crom Cruach, who had already forgotten about them, and the two evil dragon clones. Devil Ninja. Naruto was crouched on the ground as he drew numerous seals upon the floor. They were not seals that anyone from this world would know, as they came from his original world. Each symbol looked somewhat reminiscent to kanji, but the shape and overall flow of the lines was different, unfamiliar, and he was the only one who could read them. That was kind of sad when he thought about it. Maybe he should consider teaching someone how to draw seals in this world. He wasn't alone. Ophis was with him. She stood against the wall, her arms crossed as she watched him with careful eyes. He didn't know what she was thinking. Her face remained a blank slate, but that wasn't too unusual. Ophis's face almost always looked like that, except when they were having sex. Then she just looked lewd. "Are you sure this seal will allow me to reclaim the power that was stolen from me?" she asked. "It should," Naruto said. "What if it doesn't? Then we're fucked." That doesn't instill much confidence. Naruto shrugged as if to say, "What more do you want from me?" Seals were a very precise type of jutsu meant to seal everything from objects and living beings to chakra. It could also be used to restrict someone's movement or unseal objects. What Naruto was doing right now was creating a seal that would seal Ophis's power inside of the room, and then unseal that power inside of Ophis, thus transferring her power back to her. Well, that was how it would work in theory. "I'm about done," Naruto said at last. "Do you think you can lead Lilith to this room? And how do you propose I do that? You like candy, right? I'm sure Lilith is the same. Why not lead her here with candy?" Ophis stared at him with one of those, "You cannot be serious," expressions his women sometimes give him when he says something stupid, but he was being serious. Wasn't the powerful girl who loved sweets a popular trope? He was sure it was. Naruto had seen enough anime to know how this all worked, and he was sure it would work in real life just as well. With a sigh, Ophis pushed herself off the wall and walked out the door. Naruto watched her go, and when the door shut behind her, he turned back to his seal. He just needed to add a few more brush strokes. Devil Ninja. What? Our son is a devil? Issei stared in quiet horror at his mom and dad after Rizavum dropped that bomb on them. He had never once told his parents about what he had become. Part of the reason for this was because he wanted them to live normal lives, but he wouldn't deny that another part was because he didn't want them to reject him. His family might make fun of him for being a pervert. However, they were still his family and he loved them dearly. "That's right." Rizavum crowed. "He is a devil. A monster that lives off the desires of humans." His mom and dad looked at him, and Issei looked away. He couldn't bear the thought of seeing their hate-filled gazes. Beside him, Valley remained silent, either out of respect for Issei or because he was waiting for an opening to attack Rizavum. Issei couldn't be sure. He liked to think it was the former. "Eyes, is this true?" asked his father. Issei clenched his hands into fists. His arms were shaking. What should he say? Given everything that was happening, it was unbelievable they would believe him if he said it wasn't true, which meant his only option was the truth. "Why yes. It's true. I died almost a year ago and was turned into a devil by Rias Bucko," he confessed. Silence filled the room. Issei could hear his own heavy breathing and pounding heart. It felt like his heart was going to break his ribcage into 1,000 pieces with its incessant beating. "Huh. You know, that actually makes a lot of sense." "What?" Issei blinked stupidly at his dad who, despite the situation, didn't seem too bothered as he nodded several times. It was ridiculous. His father was hanging from a cross, he was being held hostage by none other than the ultimate evil boss, and he had just been told his son was a devil, but here he was nodding along as if everything suddenly made sense. "I always wondered how you could suddenly become so popular with the girls," his father explained. "It was so random. You've always been the kind of loser whose obsession with breasts turned all the women around you away. To be honest, I had long since given up hope of you ever finding yourself a good woman to settle down with." "Gee, thanks Dad. Can you not talk about what a loser I used to be?" While Issei snapped at his father in typical Tsukomi fashion, the very act seemed to break whatever tension had been holding him hostage. Even Rizavum seemed taken aback as the menacing atmosphere he'd built evaporated like water on a hot summer's day. "What is going on here?" he muttered. "Eyes." His mother suddenly called his name. When he turned to her, it was to see she was giving him a smile only mothers could have. "No matter what you are now, it doesn't change the fact that you are and always will be our son. We love you no matter what." "That's right," his father said. If I can love you when you were a horny loser who constantly fapped to porn, I can love you now that you're a devil. Issei didn't know when the tears had started falling from his eyes, but the part of him that had always feared his parents' rejection because of what he was quietly disappeared. A weight had been lifted from his shoulders. It was odd. He hadn't actually known the weight was even there, but now that it was gone, he distinctly felt its absence. While this was happening, Rizavam Lucifer was glaring at them. The hatred in his eyes spoke volumes. What the fuck is going on here? Fuck. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Why aren't you condemning your son? Why would we do that? Asked Issei's dad. He's our son. Of course we're not going to condemn him. While those words were uplifting to Issei, they were upsetting to Rizavam. The man looked like he was ready to blow a blood vessel. There was a hard gleam in his eyes as he glared at Issei's parents. At that moment, Issei knew for certain that he needed to act, or his parents would be killed. In that case, you can just die, Rizavam said in a cold voice as he raised his hand and unleashed a burst of demonic power from his palm. A magic circle appeared before his hand, glowing with malevolence. Issei and Valley were moving before the magic circle fully formed. Despite the nearly 50 meters of distance between them, Issei was able to overcome it in an instant after transforming into his Welsh Sonic Boost Knight. He put all the power he had into his speed, rushed forward, and appeared between Rizavam and his parents. Immediately after he transposed himself between the two groups, Issei transformed into his Welsh Dragonic Rook form. The incredible increase to his power and defense would be needed to withstand an attack from Rizavam Lucifer. Or so he thought. Issei had forgotten about Rizavam's ability. Before Issei knew what was happening, his Welsh Dragonic Rook form disappeared, as did the strength. Rizavam had used his ability, Sacred Gear Canceller, to disable his boosted gear's balance breaker. Now he was defenseless. Divide. 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 And yet just before Rizavam could attack him, the power that Rizavam had been building was suddenly divided numerous times, reducing the spell's power until it completely disappeared. Rizavam clicked his tongue in distaste. He could do nothing else, however, as Valley slammed into him with the force of a dragon. He tried to use the Sacred Gear Canceller, but Valley wasn't using his Sacred Gear at the moment. The young man had turned his Sacred Gear off the moment he attacked, and so the ability did nothing, and Rizavam received a punch to the face for his troubles. Shit. Fucking damn it. As Rizavam snarled out curses, Issei turned away, projected Ascalon out of his gauntlet, and used it to cut through the crucifixes binding his parents. They would have fallen, but he quickly caught them and set them down. Thanks, son, his father said. It's my fault you're in this mess. Listen, this battle is about to get messy. Take this. Issei placed something in his father's hand. It didn't look like much, in fact, it was just a sheet of paper with complex symbols drawn on it. And his father, being a human, could not sense the demonic power coming from it. What is this? His father asked. It's a teleportation device that will take you back home. Now, Mom, hold on to Dad. Like this, his mother grabbed his father's arm and clung to it. Just like that. I'm activating the transportation spell now. This spell was something that Ajuka Beelzebub had created after they learned that Issei's parents had been kidnapped. It was designed to break through the barrier between the underworld and the human world. Anyone holding onto it would be transported to a predesignated location, that being Issei's house. I just want you to know that no matter what happens, your father and I will always love you, his mother said. Issei smiled because he would probably begin crying if he didn't. Yeah, I know, Mom. Thank you. Several loud explosions erupted from behind him. Issei knew that it meant Valley was now fighting Lucifer, which of course meant their time was now up. He channeled his demonic power into the device and watched as it opened a portal around his parents. They smiled at him one last time before disappearing within the portal, which closed mere moments later. Fuck, what kind of bullshit is this? Rizavam screamed. It seemed his inability to make Issei's parents hate him had made the man lose his cool. It looks like your plan has backfired, Valley said in a calm voice. Too bad for you, Gramps. Shut the fuck up, you little shit. Since I couldn't watch Issei fall into despair like I originally planned, I'll just kill you both right here. Wasn't killing us always in your plans? Asked Valley. Rizavam gnashed his teeth together, but he didn't say anything as he once more activated the sacred gear canceller. Both of their balance breakers disappeared. They leapt away from Rizavam, who decided to go after Valley, whom he likely classified as a bigger threat. The grandson of Rizavam was left with no choice but to cross his arms and accept a powerful attack from his grandfather. A loud noise like something cracking echoed around the room as Valley was kicked so hard he flew into a wall. Issei wasn't given much time to mourn his comrade's fate as Rizavam raised a hand and fired a barrage of magic in his direction. Since Issei currently couldn't use his balance breaker, he had no choice but to dodge the attacks. That was easier said than done. There were simply too many magical bullets hurtling toward him, and so several struck Issei in the chest, shoulders, and legs. Blood burst from numerous wounds as he was sent skidding across the floor. It doesn't matter if I wasn't able to achieve my goal of making you fall into despair. Neither of you are a match for me, Rizavam declared. Hey, I wouldn't be so sure of that, Valley said as he pulled himself out of the wall. Some blood ran down his mouth, but he wiped at it with his thumb and grinned at his grandfather. Eyes, don't you have a new form you wanted to unleash? Go ahead and activate it. I'll buy you time. Issei gawked at Valley as the man raced over to Rizavam and engaged the man in hand-to-hand combat. How did Valley know about his new ability? Not even Naruto knew exactly what he was working on. He clicked his tongue as he realized Valley must have sensed it because he was the bearer of Divine Dividing. A while back, Issei had incorporated a small piece of the Divine Dividing's power into his boosted gear. There must have been some kind of connection between the two of them now. Well, whatever. As Valley engaged Rizavam to keep him distracted, Issei reached into himself and gritted his teeth as he slowly unlocked the power he had gained from Ophis. After dying for a second time, Issei's body had been recreated using the flesh of Great Red and the powers of Ophis. While her powers had been reduced thanks to what Rizavam had done to her, she was still an immensely powerful being, and she had been able to grant him a portion of that power. He didn't have a full handle on this power just yet. He honestly needed help to control it, which was why he couldn't do a full transformation right now. Without Ophis, he just didn't have the ability to use its full potential, but he could at least partially activate this ability. After unleashing the power, Issei pushed all that power into his hand, which began glowing a startling crimson. New segments appeared on the red gauntlet. It looked even more draconic than it had before. The brightly glowing gemstone flashed as all the power turned into a small orb that looked similar in shape to the nucleus of an atom. Valley, get your ass out of the way or I'm gonna plow it. That sounded so wrong. Valley had been doing his best to keep Rizavam occupied, which of course meant he'd been getting his ass kicked. Without his boosted gear, he was simply no match for the older and more experienced devil. Rizavam had been around for thousands of years. His powers and experience were vast. When Issei told Valley to move, he was more than happy to do so. Kicking off the ground, Valley activated his wings and flew into the sky. Rizavam snarled and would have tried to follow him, but in that moment, Issei was already unleashing his attack. Eat this, fuckface. The dragon shot was one of Issei's signature moves and the first attack he had ever created. All he did was fire a concentrated beam of demonic power. On any other occasion, this attack would have been easily annihilated by Rizavam. He activated the sacred gear canceller, confident in its ability to negate any power from a sacred gear. But his eyes widened in shock when the attack did not disappear. It was only at this moment that he realized there was something different about it. Issei's dragon shot was normally a simple red beam, but this one was surrounded by an intense aura the likes of which Rizavam had only felt in the presence of one person. Ophis. Don't tell me you were able to sync your boosted gear with Ophis's powers, motherfuck? That was the last thing Rizavam was able to say before the dragon shot enhanced by the power Issei gained from Ophis overwhelmed him. His body completely disappeared as he was engulfed. So did the wall behind him. Devil Ninja, demonic power swirled around Searsex as he liberally used the power of destruction to create dozens of beams that shot at the Azidahaka clone from every direction. Arms, tails, wings, and heads disappeared within bursts of intense power. The clone was completely unable to withstand the attack and were reduced to holy lumps of meat. But it regenerated shortly after being destroyed. Searsex had never fought a more annoying opponent, but he had already worked out what kind of power this creature had. Azidahaka was a being created by Angra Mainyu. He was described in the Avesta as a three-headed, six-eyed creature that symbolized wickedness and evil. This Azidahaka clone must have likewise been created by Angra Mainyu. Because of who its creator was, Searsex could not kill it through conventional means. Let's see if this works. Since normal attacks didn't work, Searsex gathered all the power of destruction into a sphere that surrounded Azidahaka. He clenched his hand into a fist, the sphere converged, and the Azidahaka clone thrashed around as the power of destruction annihilated him at the molecular level. Searsex huffed as the dragon disappeared. That had taken quite a bit of his power, but he still had plenty left in the tank. Now I should go and see if Eyes needs any. At that exact moment, a massive beam of bright red energy erupted from Agrias, halting the battles happening all across the city. This beam of energy was so large that it could have eclipsed the moon. It erupted from one of the buildings and flew through an entire division of enemy forces. Fake-scale males and mass-produced evil dragons were wiped from existence by the tens of thousands. Their annihilation lit up the sky with hundreds of explosions. "Well, I guess he doesn't need my help," Searsex said as the blast died down. Devil Ninja, Lilith decided that she would block Indra's punch, then throw a punch of her own. She wouldn't put all her power into this attack. That would be wasteful. But she wanted to make sure it at least damaged his insides. Indra grunted as he ceased his initial attack and leapt back, putting some distance between him and Lilith. But while this allowed him to avoid having his intestines rearranged, it did not stop Lilith from launching another attack. Unfortunately, her response was so instinctive that his mind-reading ability didn't prepare him for this attack in time. Herc! A strangled scream escaped Indra as Lilith sent a blast of energy his way. It was nothing fancy. She simply waved her hand and a powerful beam burst forward and slammed into him before he could mount a proper defense. About the only thing he could do was raise his hands defensively and accept the attack head-on. However, trying to block an attack by one who wielded most of the infinite dragon god's power was suicidal at best. This can't be happening. The veins on Indra's forehead, neck, and arms bulged as he released his divine aura to enhance his godly strength. Lightning erupted from his left hand as he imbued his godly aura into Vajra. He slammed his fist into Lilith's attack, which caused the beam to curve away just enough that he could get out from under the attack. While he had avoided becoming completely destroyed, the attack itself had not diminished in the slightest. It continued on, destroyed the ceiling and wall, and disappeared into the sky beyond this building. Indra gasped for breath as he watched the attack with a grimace. He might act arrogant, and he might even be arrogant, but he did know his own limits. Fighting against Lilith had been a huge mistake. Damn it, I won't be able to steal that brat's power if I can't even defeat one little girl. You should give up, Lilith said at last. Her voice was soft and quiet, almost gentle in a way, but that and the emotionless quality to her tone only served to piss Indra off. It was like this child didn't even see him as a threat. There's no way, I'll give up, that brat's power will be mine, Indra declared despite how exhausted he was. Many people would probably be surprised by how adamant Indra was on claiming Naruto's power for himself. Brahma and Shiva had both questioned him several times. They didn't know what kind of power Naruto's other half was holding. Naruto was a strange being whose power was on par with the top 10 strongest beings in the world. If Indra had to give him a rank, he would have placed Naruto close to the top, perhaps even immediately after Shiva. If he could combine even half that power with his own, then he could speed up his plans by a whole 15 years. That was why Indra needed to claim this power for himself before it was too late. Unfortunately, he hadn't accommodated for this lowly dragon standing in his way. If you insist on trying to break through here, then I will just destroy you, Lilith proclaimed. She once more waved her hand as if to attack again, and Indra tensed as he prepared to dodge, but then several bursts of sharp pain stabbed into his leg. He looked down to find numerous purple snakes clamping their jaws onto him. With a snarl, Indra destroyed the snakes with his godly aura, but the damage had already been done. Weakness suffused his body. It felt like his bones were growing brittle. He slumped onto his hands and knees, unable to believe how easily he had been beaten. So this is the difference between me and the one hailed as the strongest being in the world. Before Ophis had lost her power, she had been known as the strongest being in the entire world. Not even Shiva could compare to her. Nearly 90% of that power was now in the possession of the child before him, making her the new strongest being in the world. Indra understood that not even Shiva would be able to win against this child. Damn it. Lilith walked slowly up to Indra as if she didn't have a care in the world. Indra could do nothing more than glare at her from behind his sunglasses, which were skewed and getting ready to fall off his face. "You're a monster," he exclaimed. "I am." Lilith tilted her head as if she didn't know what that meant, but then she shrugged, seeming not to care, and reached out to grab Indra's head. "You probably shouldn't do that. He might be a jerk, but that man is very important to the Three Factions Alliance right now, so I would appreciate it if you didn't kill him," someone with a similar emotionless quality to Lilith said from behind Indra. It was Ophis. She walked into the room and stopped beside the two of them. Lilith stared at her with a blank look. "I need to kill him so he doesn't interrupt the sealing ritual," Lilith said as if that was all the reason she needed. "You've already stopped him in his tracks. He no longer has the power to stop it. Must you kill him?" asked Ophis. "I do not know. But I must protect the sealing room. Anyone who tries to enter must be destroyed." HMPH. I see you have no concept of free will. I pity you. Anyway, here. What is this? You like sweets, don't you? This is chocolate. Ophis handed an unwrapped candy bar to Lilith. The chocolate was from the Meiji brand, the current leading chocolate manufacturer in Japan. This particular chocolate was simply a block of milk chocolate. Kaneko had introduced Ophis to his kind of chocolate during one of their shopping excursions, and it was easily her favorite flavor. Each piece was rich with the flavor of cocoa and the slightly bitter kick of dark chocolate. The combination was perfect. Since it was Ophis's favorite candy, it would surely be Lilith's favorite too. Lilith wordlessly reached out and accepted the candy bar. She didn't hesitate to nibble on it. Indra finally got to see the emotionless girl's eyes widen in surprise before she greedily devoured the chocolate. "The fuck, it's good, right?" asked Ophis. Lilith said nothing, but she did nod and, after finishing off the chocolate, she looked expectantly at her preceder. "I have more chocolate for you, but you'll need to follow me." Lilith considered that for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." Indra remained wordless as Lilith followed Ophis out of the room. For a long time, he said nothing and just stared at the now closed door, his eyes wide with incredulity. Finally, "What the fuck just happened?" he asked of no one in particular. "Devil Ninja." Naruto looked up when the door opened and in walked Ophis with Lilith in tow. He almost felt the sweat drop roll down his face. He knew that it had been his suggestion to lure the girl away from her assigned guard duty with sweets, but seeing the young girl casually munching on a chocolate bar as she obediently followed Ophis was too much even for him. "Well, it was obviously going to work since it was my idea. Yeah, my ideas always work. This is just more proof of my greatness. Mwahahahaha. All your ideas work, huh? Need I remind you of that time you had the bright idea of trying to snort ramen? How'd that work out for you? Why must you bring up my one bad idea? One bad idea? Then what about the time that you..." All right. I get it, so I'm not perfect and I make mistakes. Yeesh. You could at least let me have my moment of glory, can't you? I cannot. If I did that, then you would get a big head, well, a bigger head than the one you already have. You are mean. Naruto, I brought Lilith, Ophis said. Yes, I can see that. Okay. So this is what you both need to do. Ophis, I want you to stand in this circle, and Lilith, I want you to stand in that circle. Please do not move, okay? Will I get more candy if I stand in that circle? Asked Lilith. Naruto stared uncertainly at Lilith, then glanced at Ophis, who merely shrugged as if to ask, "Why are you looking at me?" You already know what to do. And so, with a slight sigh, Naruto summoned a bar of chocolate from a storage scroll. These high-quality chocolate bars were technically Kaneko's. He always made sure to carry a secret stash in case his catgirl wife ran out of sweets. She was a nightmare when she didn't get her fix. In either event, he handed one of those candy bars to Lilith, who accepted it and walked over to the circle without complaint. Best idea ever. For once, I agree with you. Okay. You too, Ophis, Naruto said to his infinite dragon god girlfriend. Ophis didn't say anything as she moved to the other circle. Both circles were in the middle of the most complex seal he had ever created, though he supposed seals would have been a more accurate description, since this was actually two seals combined into one. Seals were able to seal and unseal something, or transfer something, but they couldn't do both. So he had combined two separate seals and overlapped them. It was dangerous, but Naruto wasn't an amateur at sealing like a certain pedo snake who would place an odd-numbered seal on top of an even-numbered one. Are you two ready? Asked Naruto. I am, said Ophis. Lilith said nothing, but that was because her mouth was stuffed with chocolate. She did nod. He took that as a sign that it was okay to begin. Naruto shook his head and began. Sitting in the center of the circle, Naruto began going through a series of hand seals that would activate the seal. He had been practicing to do this for quite a while. His fingers formed the shape of each hand seal fluidly and easily, though he couldn't speed through them like a certain cyclops. Sweat formed on his brow as his chakra flowed through the hand seals and into the first seal, which Lilith was standing on. Lilith looked down when the circle she stood inside began glowing. Naruto bit his lower lip and slammed his hands onto the seal. The glow intensified as it began draining Ophis's power from the girl, who suddenly stumbled as her knees weakened. She looked up in surprise, unable to do much more by this point, before falling to her knees. Naruto carefully observed how much power he was absorbing from Lilith. She had so much of Ophis's power that she might as well have been the new Ophis, which meant he had quite a bit to drain. This could take a while. What should I do to keep from getting bored? Oh, I know. Maybe I should sing. Please don't. 90 bowls of ramen on the wall. 90 bowls of ramen. Take one down and pass it around. Wait. Why would I pass around ramen? What kind of sacrilegious song is this? Whoever came up with this song is a complete idiot. You're the one who came up with this song. Oh, I know another good song. Yeah. I still masturbate while eating top ramen. At a faster rate in the bigger quantities. It counts as rape when I'm slurping at this unbelievable pace. I turn the temperature up all the way. Sweat up on my face. If you give no effort. If you got no money. Then I got a cheap method. Crack it open, throw it in a pan and let it cook, bitch. Now that's a real education. Fuck books. If you wanna make in college, acknowledge. For the love of all that is holy, will you stop singing already? What? It's a great song. It is not a great song, it is a horrendous song. And I will not allow your horrible singing to taint my ears. HMPH. There's no accounting for good taste. Oh, the first step is almost complete. Whatever Kurama had been about to say was cut off when Naruto looked up. Lilith was lying on her stomach, unable to move a muscle. All of her power was draining from her. She only had maybe a fourth of it left. It wouldn't be long now before he could activate the second seal to transfer all that power back to Ophis. That is enough, Naruto. The words caused Naruto to turn around. Ophis stared at him with an expectant look. Are you sure? Yes. This is enough power. I do not need any more than this. But, if you do this, then your goal, Ophis's original goal had, for the longest time, been kicking Great Red out of the dimensional gap. She needed great power to accomplish this goal. However, now she was saying it was okay for Lilith to have a fourth of her power, which was completely counterproductive to her original goal. You know that is not my goal anymore, Ophis said, shaking her head. My goal now is to live with you and the others. And to see if we can have children. Can you even get pregnant? I will be looking forward to trying every day for the rest of our lives together. Naruto and Ophis stared at each other for a second longer, and then Naruto nodded. Huh. Well, okay then. Let's get to Phase 2. Phase 2 involved taking the power he sealed from Lilith and transferring it to Ophis, which required another long string of hand seals that felt like they took forever to complete. Naruto would have sung. However, the moment he tried, Kurama began shouting in his mind, which distracted him and made performing hand seals hard. He really didn't understand what the fox had against his awesome singing. The moment he completed his hand seals, a wellspring of power surged from the first seal and transferred to the second seal. It was hard to describe what happened in words. Millions of ethereal purple snakes burst from the seal and traveled toward Ophis, where they slithered around her and converged to create a pile so thick Naruto could no longer see the infinite dragon god. A bright glow soon encapsulated the snakes. He was forced to close his eyes lest he be blinded. The power soon vanished. The light died down. When Naruto opened his eyes again, it was to find Office staring at her own hands like they were foreign entities. She closed and opened her hands several times. As she did, Naruto stood up and walked over to her. "How do you feel?" he asked. "I feel much better. Complete." Office looked up at him. "I don't want to admit, but I have felt rather uneasy all this time. My power is as much a part of me as an arm or leg. Now that it's finally back, I can safely say I never want to be without it again." "I'm surprised you let Lilith keep some of your power," he said. Office looked over at Lilith, who was still lying in her circle. The girl was clearly unconscious. She hadn't moved from that spot even once. "What happened to me is upsetting, but that is not Lilith's fault. She is just a pawn who was created and used by Rizavam. Do you pity her?" "I do." Naruto wondered if Office even realized how much she had changed since they met. She would have never pitied someone before, but now she was showing pity to someone who had a hand in wronging her, all because none of what happened was technically Lilith's fault. As a being created by Rizavam through the Holy Grail, she really had no choice but to do as ordered. But Office still would not have pitied her in the past. "What do you want to do with her?" he asked. "We will take her with us," Office decided after a moment. "All right." Naruto began walking over to Lilith. "Then let's." "Whoa." Naruto and even Office yelped in surprise when the entire room began to shake. No, it wasn't just this room. Naruto realized that the tremors had extended far beyond this room and were shaking the entire floating island. At that very moment, a power that was easily on par with Shiva or maybe even coming close to Office's original level of power descended upon Agrias, and Naruto realized what this meant. They were too late. Yami had succeeded in becoming Trihex's Jinchuriki. Devil Ninja, there was not a single person present who did not feel the overwhelming sense of dread that exuded from Agrias. Vile. Repugnant. Evil. It was as if every dark emotion in the world had become manifested as physical sensations. Those who were not strong enough to resist this awful feeling fell to the ground, curled up into a ball, and wept. Others regurgitated the contents of their stomachs. A few even outright fainted. Searsex had been fighting against several resurrected evil dragon clones. When the power radiating from Agrias swept over him, he and the clone he was fighting turned in that direction. While the dragons bowed their heads, a cold sweat had formed on his skin, soaked into his armor, and chilled him. Outwardly, there did not appear to be anything different about Agrias now than there had been before, but as if to disabuse him of the notion that nothing had changed, the roof of a building near the center of the floating island blew out. Dark energy erupted from the hole, creating a beam of energy that blasted into the sky. Dark storm clouds gathered overhead as if drawn out by the malevolent aura. There was so much power radiating from it that Searsex couldn't even comprehend it. "This is not good," Ajuka said. Searsex didn't know when Ajuka had appeared by his side, but now wasn't the time to react with shock. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked. Ajuka closed his eyes. "Trihexa has awakened. What's more, I can sense a second presence within it. Trihexa has been sealed inside of a person." Something akin to a heavy lead weight dropped into the pit of Searsex's stomach and refused to leave. This was the worst possible scenario. All their work had been in the hopes of preventing Yami from becoming Trihex's Jinchuriki, but nothing had been going their way since this plan was put into action. They were attacked during the night by the Alliance of Hell, forced to keep half of their forces behind so they could deal with the threat, and their battle in Agrias had been met with much stiffer opposition than he expected there to be. "I just realized that for as powerful as some of our forces are, we have not been able to use that power appropriately," Searsex muttered. "You're not wrong." Ajuka remained motionless as he watched the dark beam of violent energy dissipate. "We have many powerful individuals like Shiva and Indra on our side, but they cannot bring their full might to bear in a battle that is this chaotic. Not unless they want to kill their own allies." That was always the issue with powerful individuals. Even Searsex had to be wary about bringing his full power to bear. When he unleashed his ultimate form, human-shaped aura of destruction, the power of destruction spread across the land and would erase anyone who was caught up in it. "What should we do now? Sound a retreat?" he asked. "We should get those who aren't strong enough to fight to retreat, but it looks like some of our allies are getting ready to fight against Yami," Ajuka said. Searsex noticed it after his friend did. Shiva was currently flying toward where the power they felt was coming from. The god in the guise of a young boy flew into the now roofless building and vanished. "Let's evacuate our soldiers, then create a barrier around Agrias. We will leave Yami to Shiva," Sirzek said. Yes. Thus the retreat order was sounded. Devil Ninja. Power unlike any other swirled within him. He felt the seal that bound Trihexia to him activate. Chains made from complex seals wrapped around the monster, bound it to a gigantic stake in the center of a circle, and then numerous iron grates slammed shut and further locked the creature away. Trihexa roared and thrashed like a violent beast. But Yami paid no attention to that as he began siphoning the power from it to augment his own powers. It was glorious. Magnificent. Yes. This is the power I've been wanting. The power I need to finally rid myself of that idiot. Finally, I'll finally be free of him. Aha. Ahahahahahaha. Yami stopped laughing when he sensed a power that was on par with Trihexa. He looked up. A young boy was descending from above to land on the ground. While his outward appearance didn't seem like anything special, the power emitting from his body was enough to make Yami recognize him as a threat. "You must be the one called Yami," the boy said, giving him a once-over before nodding. "I can see you really are Naruto's other half. The resemblance between you two is uncanny. HMPH. And you must be Shiva. Don't lump me in with that loser. I'm nothing like Naruto. I have ambitions and desires, and I'll do anything in my power to see them met." "Is that so? Well, unfortunately for you, I'm not sure I want to see those ambitions of yours come to fruition," Shiva said, pointing a finger at him. "So it looks like I'll have to stop you." "Do you think you can?" Yami grinned as he felt the power from Trihexa coursing through him. While Shiva's power might be somewhere on par with Trihexa, that was only when its power was not being amplified by his own. Yami quickly circulated the dark power through his body, reveling in the sensation of hatred that he could feel from the beast. Black energy erupted from his body and formed a cloak of pure darkness. It was similar in many ways to the chakra shroud that Naruto gained when he used Kurama's power, but this had no designs on it. It was just a pitch-black cloak. His transformation didn't stop there either, as claws extended from his hands, blacker than a world without light and so sharp they looked like they could split the universe in half. He chuckled when an expression of wariness crossed Shiva's face. "I'm going to enjoy this." Something dark whispered into his mind. Yes, he would enjoy tearing this powerful god to shreds. It was time for the fun to begin. Devil Ninja. The evacuation appeared to be proceeding well. All of their forces had retreated to several kilometers away from Agrias. They stood on a bluff overlooking the city. The wind blowing through the clearing seemed almost ominous. While their forces had made a successful retreat, they were a sorry bunch. Most of them were injured in some way. Over there was an angel who was missing an arm. The stump had stopped bleeding, but they hadn't been able to find the arm on the battlefield, so they couldn't reconnect it. A pair of devils crouched over by a boulder, their heads wrapped in bandages that were soaked through with blood. Close by to the angel was a fallen whose left leg had been destroyed by an errant attack. She sat on the ground with her back pressed against a log. The stump of her leg was wrapped up with a tourniquet to keep it from bleeding until one of the healers could tend to her. Rias and her peerage were better off by comparison. While all of them were injured to some degree, their wounds were nowhere near that bad. Kiba was bleeding from a head wound. Irina had small cuts running across her arms and legs, and Kaneko had several large bruises from going toe-to-toe with evil dragons. Rias herself was bleeding profusely from a wound on her left arm. One of the fake scale males had attacked her from behind when she was dealing with a mass-produced evil dragon and she hadn't been able to move out of the way in time. Fortunately, they had their own healer. "This will only take a moment," Asia said as she held her hands out to Rias's wound. The rings on her finger were glowing with a quiet radiance that was soft, gentle, and tender. Twilight healing was very much like its owner. Rias sighed in relief as her wound healed. "Thank you, Asia." "It's no trouble." Asia smiled at her before moving on to heal the others. Rias watched her for a moment, then grimaced and looked at her group. Not all of them were present. Issei was there, sitting next to Zenovia, Kiba, and Gasper. Kaneko, Irina, Rosweiss, and Ravel were all together. Lefei had joined Valley and his team. Rias didn't know when the other members of Team Valley had appeared, but Valley himself had arrived with Issei. "It seems our circumstances have become pretty unfavorable, haven't they?" said Akano as she sat beside Rias. She had a number of cuts and bruises on her body. There was even a large red mark around her throat. A dragon had wrapped its tail around her and left that mark, though it was slowly disappearing now thanks to Asia's twilight healing. Yes, it seems our situation has become grim, Rias muttered. She looked over at Agrias, currently sealed inside of a barrier that was being created by some of the most powerful members of their alliance. Sirzax, Ajuka, Brahma, and even Indra had combined their powers to create this barrier. It looked like a massive sphere of glimmering silver with hundreds of millions of magic circles surrounding it. She had never seen anything quite like it before, but then again, this was the first time in history gods and devils had worked together. "You seem worried. Thinking about Naruto?" asked Akano. "Of course I am." Rias sighed. Naruto did not show up when the retreat order was given, which means he's likely inside of that barrier even now. "I'm surprised you're not throwing a fit trying to break through the barrier," Akano hummed with a mischievous smile. Rias attempted to scowl at her. "I'm not that bad. Rias, you get so worried about members of your peerage, and Naruto in particular, that you became practically useless when Naruto was kidnapped. It took nearly a week to get you out of your funk. You buried yourself in your work simply because the thought of Naruto vanishing frightened you so badly." Warmth blossomed on Rias's cheeks. She said nothing, but that was because she couldn't deny what her second-in-command said. "I've gotten better," Rias muttered. "Besides, I have faith in Naruto now." "We all do. Anyway, I'm sure Naruto is fine, so try your best not to worry too much." "Thanks Akano." Rias smiled as Akano placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, though she removed it moments later to thank Asia and tease the girl a little. Rias put the two out of her mind as she looked back at the barrier. She thought about maybe going up to Mephisto or one of the vice commanders to ask about what they should do now, but an explosion tearing the ground apart near the edge of their ragtag army drew her attention. "What's going on over there?" asked Xenovia. "I don't know, but I think we should find out," said Rias. It didn't take long to discover what the problem was when a swarm of grim reapers, mass-produced evil dragons, and fake scale mail descended upon their army. Screams echoed from all around as battles broke out everywhere. Rias and her peerage pushed through the growing pandemonium. "These are the forces that launched a night raid on us," Revel exclaimed. "Are you sure?" asked Rias. "I'm positive," Revel said. That was not good. If this was the group that had attacked them before they could launch an assault on Agrias, then it meant the forces they had left behind to deal with them had lost. The thought caused Rias to feel sick to her stomach. "Kaneko or Kuroka, can either of you sense where Hades and the other members of the Alliance of Hell are located?" Rias asked. "I'm sorry, bucko. I can't detect them with all this chaos," Kaneko said with a shake of her head. "Don't worry your pretty little head. I can find them." Kuroka seemed confident, so Rias had their group close ranks to protect the woman as she closed her eyes and tried to sense where the most powerful enemies in the Alliance of Hell were located. She finally opened her eyes. Her expression was worried. "This is not good. It looks like the Alliance of Hell leaders are heading toward the barrier." Rias quickly determined that they were planning to kill Sirzax and the others while they were distracted maintaining the barrier. Now was literally the perfect time. "We're splitting up, Eyes and Valley. I want you to deal with Hades. You two are the strongest ones here right now. Akano, Kaneko, and Asia will join me in dealing with Nyx. Kuroka, I want you to fight Erebus with the rest of Team Valley. Meanwhile, Roswise, Lefay, Kiba, Xenovia, Gasper, and Irina will fight Tartarus. We can't let them kill our leaders." "Right. Leave it to me. Don't worry, Rias, I'll do what I can to help." "Ooh. I'm worried about Lord Michael, but I'll still do my best." Everyone gave Rias an affirmative and she asked Kuroka to tell them exactly where their enemies were. Once she had their location, she ordered everyone to split up and get moving. Rias ended up heading to where Sirzax was. She only hoped they didn't arrive too late.